Okay. Okay, good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock my time in the UK. Fair bit has happened over the sporting weekend. The British Touring Cars, the 2022 season of the hybrid era has started. I felt it actually was quite a good first race weekend at Donington Park. I'm not overly sold on how they've dealt with the new regulations with the hybrid power system. I believe hybrid is the way to go, but I think they might have to look at their hybrid usage rules. I'm not a big fan of the push to pass thing, but it's a brand new set of regulations. Most of the cars are pretty much the same. It's just the power unit that's different, and it's equivalent of running with the full ballast, the success ballast. So we shall see what happens there. They've changed the tyre regulations as well, but it was quite a fun first weekend of the new British Touring Car season. Quite a few mechanicals, so a fair few cars had mechanical issues over the weekend, including a car fire in qualifying on the Saturday. So we could see some more technical gremlins for this season, more than last season, but we shall see what happens. But the chassis are basically the same. A lot of the date is pretty much the same when they would practice with full ballast. So we shall see what happens there. Football news. As predicted, Oldham Athletic have been relegated from League Two. They're the first former Premier League side from the foundation of the Premier League in 1992 to be relegated from the Football League after 116 years in the Football League. They have now played outside the Football League. And very similar to Scunthorpe United, chronic mismanagement, poor ownership, and ongoing stadium issues. I really fear that Oldham Athletic are going to be in a worse situation than Scunthorpe United next season. I really do. They have a lot of off-field issues. There was a fan protest that got onto the field and stopped the game for a lengthy period. It's a difficult one. But I understand the fans' frustration. In my lifetime, they've been to a League Cup final and an FA Cup semi-final, and they were very close to actually winning the Premier League. They were challenging Man United in the early 90s for the Premier League in a couple of seasons. So, in the last 30 years, they have ended up where they are. Imagine if Joe Royle had led them to the League Cup and FA Cup in back-to-back seasons, how different the story could have been. Again, hindsight and certain decisions taken on the field and certain results obviously didn't go their way. But just imagine if Oldham Athletic had won that bit of silverware in the 90s, at the beginning of the Premier League era, how that can, snowball, how different things could have been 30 years down the line. But off-field mismanagement, poor ownership, and I do have a lot of fears about Oldham Athletic going forward. I think they're in a worse position. They're in a much more troubling position than Scunthorpe United. Real deep concerns about Oldham Athletic. I need to do a video on Oldham Athletic, but yeah, real concerns. I'm not sure they'll be back straight up soon either. Same with Scunthorpe. If I'm being brutally honest. If you just look at the top half of look at the whole actually of the National League table, the majority of the sides actually in there are actually former Football League sides in the last 20 years. So it does show you how long it takes to get back to the top flight. And then there's the list of clubs that were in the top flight in the 90s that are no longer in the top flight, and how long it's taken to get back. And there's some reasonable sized clubs in there. And a fair few of them have been in the non-league in the same period. So, yes, I will admit some of the clubs on the list do predate the Premier League in '92. So they are the first former Premier League club to end up in the non-league. As I say, Swindon were nearly in the same position at the start of the season. They could have been docked points for going into administration. They were saved literally on one of the final days of the off season. So it could have been Swindon and Oldham getting relegated this season. In the end, it's Scunthorpe and Oldham. But at the end of the day, Bradford City, Barnsley, Swindon, they're all ex-Premier League clubs, and they're all in the wrong divisions, I think. And again, all those clubs have been really chronically mismanaged off the field. Same with Ipswich Town at times, badly mismanaged. And And now we have the news coming out about the government going to be bringing in this independent regulator. And what is interesting is the Premier League clubs try to block said independent regulator. They're against it. So there is now a massive shift in the direction of football governance that should have happened a long time ago. Because the Premier League, the FA and the Football League have actually, over the last 30 or so years, proven themselves not fit to regulate the game and govern the game. And we could say the same about the RFL with the Super League and the issues rugby league is facing, the ECB with cricket. They are proving themselves as the governing body incapable of governing. And you've got UEFA changing club spending rules. You've got the British government saying we need a club regulator because there is so much financial instability. And I think the Derby County situation, the Southend United situation, Macclesfield going out of business, Bury going out of business, just in the last couple of seasons. What's going on at Chelsea, the blocking of the Newcastle takeover for 18 months. There's been enough awkward headlines, I think is the best way to describe the current footballing climate. Awkward headlines, tough questions. Super League proposals seem to wake people up about how football needs better. Absolutely. UEFA, when this is where people go, oh, UEFA's bad, this, that. Alexander Serafin, for me, has the right intentions about reform. Alexander Serafin at UEFA has the right intentions. Now, whether the outcomes of said reforms are the way we should go is irrelevant, I think, in the intention that he's admitting the system is broken, we need to reform it. So UEFA's proposals for their new spending rules are much stronger and do allow a little bit of flexibility so clubs don't go, break them straight away. There's a 3-year grace period in order to get clubs compliant, with some, exceptions in there to allow the compliance to be reached within the 3-year period that is being set out. Because when he took over UEFA, he did say financial fair play is broken, it doesn't work. The system is flawed, there's too many loopholes, and it is weakly enforced by domestic FAs. What we have seen this time last year was a culmination of weak governance from both FIFA down to UEFA down to the domestic FAs, and you could argue the same has happened in South America. What we have seen is reckless financial spending and financial and administrative mismanagement by the clubs themselves, and really weak governance on a national level by the national FAs in actually correctly and properly enforcing the youth transfer rules. So that's Chelsea and Man City in England, financial fair play rules, and the 135% loss over profit rule. Because there's variations of financial fair play, and each domestic league can add certain extra rules on top as long as they are UEFA compliant and UEFA okays them. But no, Alexander Serafin, he's not part of the old school Western European clique that have been running UEFA for 60 years. He's not part of that FIFA old boys club. Again, Western European old boys club. He's from Central Europe. He's young. He's ambitious, which I think is good. And he has come out, and I think look, the amount of negative headlines that football, just as in sport in general, has faced since I'm gonna actually have to say since the Italian match fixing scandal of 2005-2006, the amount of shockingly bad. Amount of clubs going into financial difficulty, who've won silverware or been in the top flight. The amount of corruption scandals, match fixing scandals, and then what happened with FIFA and UEFA and how all that blew up in the last 7 years. The sport cannot have any more negative headlines. In the last 2 years, it's almost been a constant stream of negative headlines that at the end of the day, it's a PR nightmare. It's been nothing but short of a PR nightmare for European football for 2 years. Nothing short of a disaster. Because if you are trying to sell the game as ultra competitive, those feel-good stories like a Leicester City or a Villarreal, for example, they are more likely to be less likely with the new Champions League format, but they already are very unlikely with the current Champions League format. And that is a problem. Now, I understand you need to reassess the structures of the Champions League, Europa League, etc. But UEFA made mistakes in the 90s that have led to this point, with the Champions League format being reformatted in the mid-90s, the UEFA Cup being rebranded in the 2010s, and dropping the Cup Winners' Cup and restructuring the UEFA Cup, now the Europa League, and dropping the Cup Winners' Cup in 1999. That has culminated into where we are in 2022. But that was allowed to happen under his predecessors. Now, it's not his fault that he has been forced to get the brains trust together and go, right, we need to fix a lot of these problems. At the same time, those 12 Super League clubs have gained influence, and a lot of them have gained wealth and then lost that wealth. So they're making all this money, but questions have to be asked where all this TV money's gone, where all the club ticket revenue and merchandise revenue's gone. People are sat there. It is. It actually adds more fixtures to the calendar, more. And supporters groups are like, no, less is more. Supporters want less games. They want a lot of supporters actually would love to see the old straight knockout format of the old European Cup competitions. So Cup Winners' Cup come back, the old format of the UEFA Cup come back, and the old European Cup early Champions League format of just straight knockouts, no group stages, because the group stages are just dead rubbers where players get injured and suspended in avoidable circumstances. And it impacts both club and country, especially a player getting a long-term injury. I remember when Wayne Rooney broke his foot, and David Beckham broke his foot, both in Champions League matches. But yes, they are very similar in format to the European Super League. They just involve more clubs. It's just a bigger, simpler version of what the European Super League would have looked like because there's more clubs, and they are expanding it. So yes, another problem that UEFA has caused is the UEFA coefficient. Before 1992, look at the amount of clubs from all over Europe that were making the latter stages of the European Cup competitions. And now it's a handful of leagues are making the latter stages. Even the Conference League. So it hasn't actually benefited. The Conference League was designed to benefit the next tier of the top European leagues below the Big Five, and it hasn't. Because you look at the semi-final lineup. Yep. And another reason why they expanded it was the reintroduction of English clubs following the European ban following Hazel. Was another reason why the reformat of the Champions League happened in the 90s. And because of that European ban, a lot of good clubs in England missed out on European football, and a lot of good players missed the high points of their career playing in the European club competitions like the Cup Winners' Cup, UEFA Cup, and European Cup Champions League because of Liverpool fans' misbehaviour in Belgium at Hazel in 1985. I did not see the Millwall Birmingham full time. What happened? I sort of fell asleep, so I missed the Oldham Athletic relegation. I'll do a video on Oldham Athletics relegation and what I fear the future for Oldham Athletic looks like, and I fear they could go out of business. And that would really, put the dander up because they've been in cup finals, they've been a Premier League side, so a hell of a lot of questions have to be asked about the Premier League, the FA, and the Football League yet again about another club that's been run into the ground, asset stripped, and left rudderless and broke, and in a league it shouldn't be in. And they were a good side in the 80s and the 90s, and they've been destroyed over the last 30 years by the fact that the fit and proper persons directors test didn't exist. Kicked off after Millwall got a 98th minute pen, stormed the pitch. It's on YouTube. Why am I not surprised with the Zulus and the Millwall firm kicking the crap out of each other? Neither side's going for promotional relegation. They are. Again, the fact that another high-profile incident has occurred. Everton, they did win one European title in the 80s, but after Hazel, they had a really good side until the mid-90s, and they couldn't compete in Europe, so they could not really retain a lot of their good players and the structures they built in the 80s and the early 90s, and then since 95, they've won nothing. And they're now in the relegation zone, and if they get relegated from the Premier League, Jesus Christ, the ramifications of that be far bigger than what's happened to Oldham Athletic. But that's another club from the northwest, a hotbed of English football that's been run into the ground. And again, huge questions have to be asked of the FA, and in this case, the Premier League. Again, we're talking about stewarding issues and security problems at a football ground, considering that we've got a major football tournament this summer with the Women's Euros. We've got the Rugby League World Cup, and obviously what happened last summer at Wembley in the Euros final, and we're trying to bid for the 2028 Euros. It's not a good look to have with the situation. It really isn't, and it's now on YouTube, and it will be seen globally. And it's especially with Millwall. It's a club that has an unfortunate reputation with a proportion of its fan base who do this sort of thing. And unfortunately, it's had that reputation for 30, 40 years, and he can't shake it. Every time there's a Millwall incident, it's very high profile, and it makes, now it's on social media. Back in the day, it would make them. I remember I've got a couple of books about the history of hooliganism in British football, and Millwall, the Millwall Luton FA Cup game, which was broadcast live with the riot at Kenilworth Road in the 80s, live on TV, and the Millwall and Luton hooligan firms clashed, and several thousand of them were having a punch up. That was the real low point. And this is in the years before the Hazel disaster and before Hillsborough and before the Valley Parade fire, and issues surrounding some big incidents that resulted in a large loss of life. But it's still a security concern, because if what we've seen with those eco protesters getting on the pitch at Goodison and a couple of other games and cable tied themselves to the goalposts, and what we've seen around the world, actually, there's been a few high profile incidents in Australia. Here, there's been some issues all over the world. Doubtless there won't be, but there's still that risk of an idiot who goes, right, okay, the security will be even less at the women's tournament. And it is highlighting a massive problem that football in the UK, because it's not just an English problem, it's Welsh and Scottish as well, has. And we've got two major international tournaments this year in the UK, and it is highlighting a massive issue we have with stadium security. And it's not just this year. We've seen some instances in the last couple of years. And it's weak stewarding and poor security. But who should foot the bill? Should it be the club paying the bill? Should it be the Football League paying the security bill? Should it be the club? Obviously, there's match day policing. Who should foot the financial expenditure for the security arrangements at football games? Should it be the local authority? Should it be the club? Should it be the league? Should it be a mixture of all three, where it's equally divided? Because They obviously have an operating license, which is granted by the council, technically, to have a large open air event. You then have the Football League, where there's rules which stadiums have to meet to be security compliant, which comes under the FA and the Football League. And then the club itself, which is a standalone entity. This is the big question about who should pay for match day security at these large sporting events. Doesn't matter what it is. Football just has problems. The violence and verbal abuse that fans think is acceptable, you can't change it. I think it's something about us that it's the number one sport. The media, the mainstream media, doesn't help. What I think is a positive with the sport is the amount of social media channels and bloggers and fan groups online who are trying their best to call out the troublemakers and isolate the troublemakers. And I think a lot of the fan channels on YouTube and Twitch and fan groups on Twitter and supporters groups that are pressure groups towards the FA, they are trying their best, but they're not getting the support which I think the FA and the Premier League and the EFL should be supporting these groups and actually backing them with their campaigns to kick out the hooligan element. Unfortunately, yeah, it is an indictment on us. The professional sports that are played in the country mirror the society the sports are played. So what we have seen in recent years is an upwards trend in disorder at both football and at rugby league, and now we're seeing it in rugby union and cricket. Some unsavoury incidents involving fans and players, and professional sports, the fan base and the sports mirror the society. We were making great progress in the 2000s and the 2010s. There was great progress made until about 5-6 years ago, and we've seemed to have taken a lot of backward steps. But then there are, the majority are having their experience ruined by the minority. Now, I'll be interested which club gets fined for the disorder at the Birmingham Millwall game. I'll be very, very interested how the EFL and the FA, who will get punished with a fine for the disorder we saw, or is on YouTube, which I'll have a look at. Which club will get the punishment? Because right now, Birmingham City St Andrews, only half the stadium is allowed to be open because of safety concerns. It is at Birmingham's ground, although it is Millwall fans starting the disorder. Birmingham City are the club that are footing the bill for the security and the policing costs. It is more of a football issue, but rugby, there's been some unsavoury incidents in recent months. There's been some incidents at both union, and there's been a history in league as well. There's a minority in rugby league as well, both here and abroad. But it's mostly an association football, because obviously we've got overseas subscribers who will call it soccer. So it is mostly an issue within a handful of sports. And we see isolated incidents in North America in the NFL and the NHL where there are issues with pockets of fans, normally to do with alcohol with the American sports. They can't handle their liquor. You give Americans alcohol and their brains switch off, but they never switch their brains on anyway. God knows how the American fans are going to cope when there's a large amount of foreign fans going over for the World Cup in 4 years' time. God knows how they're going to cope. And the Stanley Cup riot. Yes, there's been multiple, and they all seem to happen in Canadian cities. You have the two riots in Vancouver, 2011 and 94. There's been multiple riots in Montreal at various times, mass disorder in Montreal, going back to the 60s. And I'm not joking on that. The Paul Ricard riots, when they traded him and they just went on the rampage in downtown Montreal for 2 days. And I'm not joking, it was a real thing. Most major acts of disorder in the US and Canada are actually sport related. The majority of what is classed as a riot, which I think is at least 30 people acting in an aggressive manner. Yes, that is true. A riot is about 30. It has to be a minimum of 30 people. It's classed as a riot. Oh no, the 2009 League Cup disorder. That was highlighted. That was highlighted when it came to the bidding process for the last two World Cups. For this World Cup coming up and the Russia World Cup, that was highlighted, was the West Ham Millwall disorder at the League Cup game at the old Upton Park, and my friend John was actually there. The NHL rights involving the Stanley Cup in Vancouver in '94 and 2011, and there's been some riots in Montreal, and there has been some disorder. I think it was the Colorado Avalanche. There was one year they got knocked out or something. I think it was in '99 they had a riot and they lost a key playoff game or something. We've seen it in other sports as well in the US, but it's mostly to do with alcohol in regards to that. There's otherwise it's generally, better like next year. But you put alcohol in the mix with North Americans, and they tend to lose their shit. But the difference is the police in America are all armed with high caliber weapons, and our police aren't. Our police are armed with truncheons, whereas in North America they have assault rifles. But no, rugby league does have a couple of clubs where they are troublemakers. But no, in reality, the disorder between Millwall and Birmingham is nowhere near on the level it was in the 80s. However, and I will say this, we are in the process for bidding for 2028 Euros. And if more incidents keep happening on a big enough scale, UEFA will look very dimly upon that. But there's a lot of issues in mainland Europe as well. It's all about how the press reports it. Now, I've not seen anything online that suggests it's a big story. But the Oldham Athletic match yesterday, where they lost the game, they got relegated, and the fan protest on the pitch, which stopped play for a lengthy period, has made more headlines, and there was no violence involved with that. That was literally a fan-based protest against the ownership and the direction of the club. They could have done it in a better way, but they decided to do what they did. It's getting more headlines than Millwall Birmingham. I think possibly because the game had to actually be stopped for a lengthy period and suspended. But we've still got that lingering issue with what happened at the Euros last summer. And of course, yes, the women's game is probably going to have no problems whatsoever. There'll be no issues with the women's Euros in a couple of months. Probably nothing will happen. But security issues are being raised again. And they're rearing their ugly head. And we're in a bidding process for a major tournament in 6 years' time. And we're very likely to get the tournament. Very, very likely. We are favourites. But that will be held in a very dim view if enough people on YouTube and enough people on Twitter and enough people share the footage, and it's going to be seen globally, because YouTube is a global platform. This isn't just like a national platform with a limited reach globally. This is a global platform that I'm using, that you guys are commenting on, that the video has been posted on. It is a global video sharing platform, and unfortunately, especially in the US and Canada, which can get a lot of hits very, very quickly, the sport is growing in popularity. And for some reason, the Americans love the European, especially the British sporting culture. And that's the major issue. Is it could there's suddenly your major issue is if the North American audience, because a lot of the major big sponsors have American investment in the companies, such as Ford and Sony, and some of these big sponsors of these major tournaments have US money in them, and the game has got a lot of US money invested in it. In regards to the Oldham situation, long before this current owner came along, the club has been in decline. Long before this owner came along a couple of years ago, the club has been in decline for the best part of 25 years. The stadium is a bit is half of it's demolished. There's issues with the stadium. Initially, Oldham Rugby League and Oldham Athletic, they were applying to the local council to have a multi-use, similar to the DW in Wigan, a multi-use stadium, very similar to Huddersfield and Wigan, where both league and union could be played all year round, because Super League came along and Rugby League became a summer sport. And for whatever reason at the time in the 90s, Oldham Council, the local authority, decided not to fund or withdrew funding. It was on there was a planning application put forward, and the council decided not to proceed with what would have been vital reinvestment in a very deprived, poor area of the country. Construction creates a lot of jobs, and that has a knock-on positive impact. A more modern stadium, and for whatever reason, Oldham, which is part of Greater Manchester, decided not to go forward with the proposed stadium plan, and now both Oldham Rugby League and football clubs are no longer at the pinnacle of the sport that they participate in. They've fallen down the pecking order. On top of that, chronic mismanagement of the field, and some really poor decisions have been taken. But again, in the Northwest, especially in those more niche regional clubs with smaller fan bases, you're competing for the corporate money. So you're competing for sponsors, you're competing for fans, and you're competing for the playing talent. And when you've got a club like Man United or a club like Liverpool, and at the time a club like Blackburn, who competing for trophies and higher up pecking order, they're going to have a better pool for youth players and youth talent, and a better pool for corporate sponsorship. And Oldham just couldn't compete with that at the time. Now, had they won that League Cup and that FA Cup, and actually maybe won the Premier League in that period as well, because they were very close, they weren't a million miles away from winning the Premier League in the early 90s, how different the story could have been for investment, corporate sponsorship, revitalisation of Boundary Park. But they didn't win those trophies, and this is all hypothetical, and it's harder without the success to get the inward investment required, especially when you are in a poorer area of the Northwest, which Oldham is, a very deprived area, post-industrialised community. And when you're in such a congested sports market like the Northwest is, with rugby league, now rugby union, you've got cricket as well, and football, and even ice hockey, because there's professional ice hockey teams as well. And you are competing for the youth talent, and you are competing for the corporate sponsorship, and you are competing for the TV revenue and the fans in attendance, and you are competing in a very, very, very congested sports market. It is very difficult to take that next step. And Greater Manchester especially has got so many football clubs in it, and now several rugby league clubs that are professional, and Sale Sharks, a professional rugby union club, that it is a really congested sports market. And now that Bury have gone out of business, and now that they're relegated and possibly could go out of business, they are facing a serious financial shock, basically. That sports market, the northwest of England, has already had one victim in the last couple of years, and it could have a second. And technically, Chester, they've had to reform twice. So already you can see the strain that the limited population size, because you're limiting your, let's just say Lancashire, Greater Manchester and Merseyside and North Cheshire. That's your sports market, right? And when you've got so many professional sports teams, and we're talking professional in all the sports, competing for a limited population and corporate money base for domestic sponsorship, and a limited amount of youth and regional talent to say, right, okay, we're going to get you involved in our sport. There's a finite amount of money. Now, yes, you could say Liverpool was the city of culture and had UNESCO World Heritage status. So that means money's coming in. There's been massive development in Liverpool. Manchester, Commonwealth Games in 2002. And again, a lot of money has come into Manchester with the Etihad Stadium and the complex. But there are, as I say, a congested market with a limited, finite amount of resources. And this is what Everton are finding out now. This is what, as a Blackburn fan, and I know Burnley fans and Preston North End and Blackpool and Fleetwood and Morecambe, and I could list them all. This is why Bury have gone out of business. Well, they haven't, the poor ownership, but Bury, Rochdale, there's too many professional teams playing at all levels in all sports. I'm counting all the major team sports here, competing for a finite amount of fans. And a few of those teams are big teams. They have a bigger reach, they have more money, and they can outcompete the slightly smaller, more regional teams for recruiting that youth talent, grabbing the young fans' attention, TV revenue, bigger sponsors, and it becomes a snowball effect. And this is what we've seen: is a handful of clubs have benefited from the Premier League era, and Oldham were a Premier League club. And they are the first former Premier League club to fall out the Football League by pure relegation and not with points deduction. Portsmouth nearly went with all the administrations and points deductions. And imagine that would have been, I think, a far bigger story because they've won silverware and they've been in Europe. Portsmouth were very lucky not to end up like Oldham a decade or so ago. And they still haven't got back. They still haven't got back. Their finances is Portsmouth are in a weaker position now than before they got in the Premier League in the first place. And they're in a less congested sports market on the south coast. Whereas the northwest, very much like Yorkshire as well, it's got a finite amount of corporate money and population size and resources. The resources being the playing base. And that is part of the problem. This is why rugby league in this country is stuffed. It's because they're obsessed with the M62 and they are competing against professional football and professional cricket, and to a certain extent ice hockey as well. And they are competing against other established team sports that are all winter leagues and are all ironically well backed with sponsors, better infrastructure. A lot of clubs have had new stadiums and stadium refurbs and ice hockey. I mean, Sheffield has got 2 quality ice rinks. That ice rinks all year round that have other events in there, but they are quality facilities. And they are competing against, and rugby union starting to win the battle as well. And this is where rugby league is struggling, and the Northwest in general is struggling on a footballing standpoint. There's too many clubs. But at the same time, you want to have as much competition as possible because it is a healthier product. And that's what attracts the overseas fans, is how competitive our league structure is. And I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know what happens for clubs like Oldham and what happens to Everton, because they're now in the relegation zone in the Premier League. And I don't know what happens with a whole host of clubs, Derby and such, because the situation is so, and Barnsley and a lot of these clubs have been shockingly managed off the field, shockingly run, and the governing bodies have been just toothless in properly governing the sports, and yet the clubs are resisting the independent regulator idea. They're resisting it, and you're thinking to yourself, the only reason why you want to resist it is because the rules they're going to put in place will impact you in maybe a positive or a negative sense. But yeah, Everton are in serious trouble. They're already facing a possibility of a points deduction for next season for breaching spending rules. They've just broken ground on their new stadium, which they plan to be in 3 years' time. They are in serious trouble. And it's not Lampard's fault. People go, "Oh, Lampard, it's his fault." It's not. It's the ownership. It's they have the same problems as Man United. They really do. It just so happens Man United are further up the table for some reason. The off-field structure of the club are rotten, and Bill Kenwright is a big part of playing this. And if they do go down, I can't see them getting back up. And they've not been outside the top flight since Queen Elizabeth was coronated in the early 50s. They in Liverpool have only spent a couple of seasons outside the top flight since the 50s. And there's your problem. They've got too comfortable with their position. And they've had some very successful teams since the 50s. They've very successful teams at periods. And they've been a middling club since 1995. Middling. They've had a few rough seasons where they've been in relegation scraps. A few. But you look at the amount of money they've spent. You look at the talent they have produced, and they have produced quality talent that they then sell on. And it's so surprising. They have been a talent production line, much like a lot of clubs in the Northwest, for decades. And in recent years, that talent production line has started to dry up. And their league finishing position is getting worse and worse. Now, Ancelotti, I was very surprised that Ancelotti I decided to leave after a season. Maybe he saw the structural problems with the club and he was like, nah, I'm not staying here anymore. I value my reputation in the European game as a player and as a coach. When they got Ancelotti, I was a bit surprised, but it showed that they were being serious, I thought, and he's gone after a season. So they get Benitez. Again, slightly surprised Benitez is going there, but at the same time, he's a proven coach, and he was given a budget, which he didn't have at Newcastle. And we saw what he did at Liverpool and Valencia, so we know Benitez is a proven coach, and they sack him. Lampard, he's only managed for 3 seasons in professional football. 3 seasons he's been a manager. And on social media, a lot of people are lampooning Lampard. They shouldn't. They should be lampooning the owners of the club because the club has been so mismanaged for 27 years. It's borderline comical. And Bill Kenwright has a big part to play in that mismanagement. And I think they are stuffed. I honestly do. Because I can see them doing a Leeds United, a Blackburn, a Portsmouth, a Bradford City, and tumble down the divisions until they're in like League One, League Two territory. And then what happens? You're building this 60,000 seater stadium and you're playing in League One. That's ridiculous. I can see them do a Sunderland, And it took Leeds 16 years for Leeds to get back to the top flight. 16 years. Let that sink in. 16 years it took Leeds to get back into the Premier League. 16. And I fear it could be a long time between drinks, so to speak. And this is something that's been repeated by a lot of clubs. Oxford United, Luton Town, they're ex-old Division 1 clubs from pre-Premier League. They've never been back. Swindon, ex-Premier League club, they've never been back. Oldham, obviously. Portsmouth, Bradford City, Barnsley, Blackburn. You are not guaranteed to escape the clutches of the Championship and then the possibility of ending up like Ipswich, for example, who've been a Premier League club and have won the UEFA Cup back in the day, been a very successful side while doing it in the 80s, ending up in League One. You are not immune from that. And the ultimate fear I have is they are in such financial difficulty with their overspend that I got some quality players, but something has gone wrong with that club, with being 8th last year under Ancelotti to being 17th right now on their second manager of the season. At Forest, Sheffield Wednesday, Coventry, the list goes on. Forest are in a good position in the Championship, and I think they can take that next step. And if they do make the playoff final, they've got a very, very good chance of getting the 3rd promotion spot. I do believe that. They are in a very strong position. They've been on a good run of form since just before Christmas. They started the season terribly, and if they started the season like they're playing now, they would be above Fulham. I have no doubt on that. They'll be above Bournemouth and Fulham. So they are playing very, very well, and I don't think they've peaked yet. And the way they played against Arsenal in the FA Cup and played them off the pitch, I think they could be fine if they made the Premier League. I really honestly do. But yeah, Nottingham Forest, it's been 24 years. 24 years since Forest were a Premier League club. And this is a 2-time European Cup winner. This is not a nothing team. This is a team with a great history, which has won a lot of trophies, which was a dominant side in the late 70s, early 80s, into the 90s. regularly competing for trophies, playing in FA Cup finals, winning League Cups, winning, European Cups, winning the league. And it's been 28 years. 28 years. Or 24 years or something. It's they got relegated in 98. Coventry, it's been 22 years. And that is absolutely shambolic. And Portsmouth, and then so the situation that we find ourselves in with a lot of clubs is just what I call chronic mismanagement. Chronic. And then we get to the point last summer with the European Super League, and it raises its head every decade. It's been raising its head every decade for the last 3 or 4 decades. And this is where UEFA have been weak in the satellite TV era, and a handful of clubs have really profited from the UEFA coefficient and the money. But then you have to ask the question: where's all this money gone? It cannot all be on player transfers and agents fees. Something has gone horribly wrong when clubs are like £1.5 billion in debt if it weren't for their owner, or 1.3 billion euros in debt. If it wasn't for Abramovich loaning the club 1.5 billion, they're in a worse state than Barcelona. And technically, Chelsea are not a profitable entity as things stand with their business model. It's the same with Barcelona. They've stopped being profitable a long time ago, and they are hemorrhaging money. It's the same with Man United, leverage takeover. Same with Burnley now, leverage takeover. That should not be allowed to happen. When basically the club is leveraged with debt. It's someone else's money. It's not the owner's money. It's someone else's money. It's loans that are bought. That should not be allowed, yet it has been. With 2 clubs in the Northwest, admittedly at different ends of the Premier League table, and the amount of success they've had. But Burnley, historically, founders of the Football League, and back in the day, I will say this, in the 50s and 60s, had a fair bit of success. Should not be allowed. The fabric of the game at a community level is being destroyed. Why Spurs were in the... No, Blackburn, we've won the One League Cup, but we've won 2 trophies in the same time since Tottenham won their... Yeah, no, we've won... In my lifetime, Tottenham have won as many trophies as Blackburn. And yes, Leicester have won more trophies. Blackburn have actually won a Premier League. Tottenham have won nothing, apart from a League Cup, since I was a kid. And we're talking the Gazza era and that FA Cup win. I was 6 months old. To me, I don't remember it, therefore it doesn't count. No, but in my lifetime, Leicester have won 2 trophies. But my club have won 2 trophies, including a league title. Tottenham haven't done that. How they claim they can deserve to be a Super League club is beyond me. Why? Because they beat Real Madrid a few times with Gareth Bale having a few good games. It is beyond me. Borough League Cup, Wigan FA Cup, Birmingham League Cup, Swansea League Cup, Blackburn we've had a Premier League and a League Cup, Portsmouth FA Cup and trophy, and Leicester an FA Cup, a Premier League and a Charity Shield. You could not make this up. They have won less. Yet they claim they're one of these Super League clubs, but in the last decade they've won nothing. And why are they a Super League club? Is it because they've got super amounts of debt? They're the second most indebted club in the last 12 months. And if you look overall, they're the club with the 3rd biggest debt or something, year on year. And yes, a lot of those clubs now, apart from Leicester, are no longer in the Premier League. But at the time they won those trophies, they were in the Premier League. So yeah, only one of those clubs that you've listed is currently a Premier League club. So I will admit, okay, they've not been fortunate in their league position. However, Tottenham is one of those clubs, much like Man United and Everton, that is no longer a footballing club. It's a business. It's a corporate club. It's no longer run as a footballing club. It's run for money. And some of the decisions made at Tottenham mirror the decisions made at Man United and Everton. So make of that what you will. Make of that what you will. Now, when it comes to historical success, they've not had a lot, I'll tell you that. A couple of league titles in there donkeys ago. But when it comes to historical success, apart from the FA Cup with record holders at one point, with a record of 8, which I think surpassed Blackburn's joint record of 7. They held the FA Cup record with 8 wins. That has since been surpassed by quite a bit. They're not in the same. It's ridiculous. Oh wow, we've got a shiny new stadium, which they can't fill on match days. By the way, they've never got it to capacity, and 14 seasons without a trophy. That is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. They're not close to a trophy. They're not close to the league. They've mismanaged on the footballing side of things because whoever's in charge of recruitment there is not a footballing person. It's a business club. It's a corporate club now. Louis van Gaal summed up a lot of the football clubs currently in European football. They're no longer footballing clubs. They are corporate clubs. They are business clubs. They focus solely on profit and not enough on balancing it between the sporting side and the business side. They've gone, the balance is wrong because there's too much money in the sport. Too much money in the sport. Not enough transparency. Too much money sloshing around. And look at PSG. They Pochettino, right? The fans, they've won the league at a canter this season. Won the league. Fans left with about 15 minutes left. And by the time of the final whistle, most of the fans were out the stadium. Within 10 minutes, the Parc des Princes was empty. They have just won another league title, equaling St Etienne's league title record of 10. They have equalled that, right? At the same time, they haven't won the Champions League, which they've tried to buy, basically. They've tried to buy European success. And Pochettino, while he's won his league title, and he adds it to his cup titles he's won in France, European success eludes them, and it just shows. And Messi's only scored like 4 goals in the league, and I think 7 goals all season, or 9 goals all season. Messi scored 9 goals all season. Maybe the greatest player of all time cannot do it in the French league. Just going to leave that out there. Ronaldo this season, hopeless. Messi this season, hopeless. It's literally a corporate move to sell merchandise by signing those players. And Van Gaal was right at that press conference about a month or so ago when Erik ten Hag was initially linked with the role. He would say, any manager linked with this role, I would advise them not to go there. It is no longer a footballing club. It's all about making money. It's a business now. It is a corporate club. They have completely got the balance wrong. And some of these signings are all about selling merchandise. Selling merchandise. It's got nothing to do with the fans, the hardcore fans, the traditional fans, and actually, competing on a sporting level. They've got the balance all wrong. So Messi going to PSG was purely a corporate decision. They got him for nothing, and the owners, have infinite money, and they dodgy dealings anyway, and just flog as much merchandise as possible globally. He scored 9 goals all season in all competitions and only 4 in the league. That's a great footballing decision, getting a guy who's maybe got a year or 2 left in his career, who's starting to get injury prone, who throws his toys out the pram when he can't get 400 grand a week. Oh, and has dodged tax illegally and has got a criminal conviction for tax evasion. I'm just going to drop that out there. He's got a criminal conviction for tax evasion. And his excuse and his father's excuse is laughable about his conviction. They claim they're innocent, yet they were avoiding paying tax for years in Spain. But because the Spanish legal system is your first offence and you pay a small fine, you make the problem go away. Same with Ronaldo. He's a saint. He's been done in a Spanish court for fraud and tax evasion. Not avoidance, evasion. Proper actually breaking the law. And people go, he's such a lovely guy. No, he's not. But the reason why, and people idolise these people, I just don't get it. I don't get it. I really don't. How they idolise these egomaniacs. Yeah, they're far better than me. I'll ever be as a football player. I don't give a fuck. People idolise these egos, these not very likeable individuals if you actually were to properly meet them away from the public persona of the cameras. I must shake the kid's hand. I must give an autograph. I've got to be seen to be, the nice guy. They're not nice individuals. They're not. A lot of people say they're actually cunts. If PSG can't win the Champions League next season, then their best hope is to trust their academy. What academy players? Because they don't produce any youth talent. They buy the best talent from around the world as mercenaries. When was the last time a PSG academy product played in the first team? 10, 15 years, something like that? They don't produce youth talent. They buy the best available talent from all around Europe, including in France. Where's that youth talent? You know why? Because it's a tax write-off. It's sports washing. It's a corporate write-off. So PSG makes no money. It's another reason why they got Messi, so they could actually start making money, so it looks good in the balance sheet. No, I'm being serious. It's another reason why they got Mbappe and Neymar. It's a corporate thing, so it actually looks good on the balance sheet. But they paid $250 million for Neymar, so they've got to pay that back. They've got to find that revenue from somewhere. Poch is done. Poch is gone. They're linking PSG with Conte now. What is it with PSG and ex Tottenham managers? I mean, Christ, if Conte goes, Ancelotti's coached there as well. So what is it with Tottenham and Chelsea, ex-Tottenham and Chelsea managers getting linked with the PSG and Man United job? You couldn't make this shit up. You really couldn't. And PSG are now thinking about moving on from Pochettino and bringing in Conte. But I can't see that solving their issues in Europe because they've got a team of mercenary players and they don't develop any youth. For all the money they have, when was the last time a PSG youth talent of any note actually made the first team? Even played a game? Because I can't think of one. And that tells you all you need to know about the culture at PSG. It's very similar to the culture of Man City, and it'll be very, very similar to the culture at Newcastle. They will rely on mercenary players, and they always have done. And not enough local talent is given a chance. Because the short term is corporate, so we'll get the big name players and we'll flog the merchandise. And PSG has already devalued the French league massively. What Lille did last year was amazing. And then very, very quickly, their team was dismantled. Very, very quickly, their team was dismantled. And now Lille are a mid-table club again. Their squad's been dismantled from last season because they can't afford to keep. That's the problem. That is the problem. There is a complete imbalance in that league. Complete imbalance. And Pochettino is going to suffer the results of it because their league that they play in is uncompetitive and they can't win in Europe because they don't. They've not had it all their own way this season either. They've had some bad defeats in there, but the league they play in is so imbalanced because they just spend what they want, and the other clubs cannot compete. They cannot compete on the same level. And German football was starting to go the same way. Bayern with 10 in a row, 10 titles in a row. The last two teams to lift the title other than Bayern are Dortmund and Wolfsburg, and they're now losing their best talent because they cannot afford to keep them because the way Bayern have dominated the league. And while the German ownership model is far more stable, and clubs are more stable in Germany now than what they used to be, because there has been a complete attitude shift over the last 20 to 30 years in German football. Bayern is doing what PSG has done to France, and they are devaluing their domestic league, and the national side will suffer as a result. Look at the last Euros. France and Germany were terrible. Absolutely terrible. And the longer Bayern Munich and PSG just continue to, win every season, and they don't win every trophy because Bayern aren't winning the German Cup this season because they were knocked out by Borussia Mönchengladbach convincingly earlier on in the season. So they're not having a clean sweep of German football, which is a nice thing. But the longer the league title is just the same club over and over again, it ends up devaluing your product. You end up like Scotland, with a very devalued product. And you have to go back even further in Scottish football to find a club that wasn't Celtic or Rangers, and that's Aberdeen. And then they dominated for a period. And you have to go back even further to Falkirk in the 70s. And Dundee United. We have to go back 40, nearly 50 years where one of three clubs hasn't won it in Scotland. So that just tells you all you need to know about the situation in Scottish football and in certain leagues. And then what doesn't help is the UEFA coefficient, which has completely devalued so many leagues across Europe. And it's devalued the domestic cup competitions because they've got the Cup Winners' Cup, and then you end up with a situation you have where a handful of clubs and a handful of leagues have a lot of power, a lot of influence, and a lot of money, or a lot of revenue-making streams over, money, it's all in debt, but ways to make revenue, which UEFA likes. However, it weakens UEFA's position because there's a handful of very powerful, wealthy clubs on paper that seem to get push for changes that benefit them over everyone else, the other 95%. UEFA then come back with stricter things, and it ends up getting watered down with the changes that UEFA brings in, like the Champions League and such. The Conference League was meant to benefit the lower, the second tier, top flight leagues in Europe, and it hasn't. So it's another way to make revenue for the Big Five. And while I want Leicester to win it, and I want to see Eintracht Frankfurt or West Ham win the Europa, and I want to see Villarreal win the Champions League, all those clubs that I've mentioned, apart from Rangers in the Europa, are from one of the Big Five leagues. I didn't mention Rangers initially, but there you go. And that's where the UEFA coefficient has completely failed the European game. And UEFA has failed the European game by caving into 12, 15, maybe 20 bigger clubs historically that are great revenue earners. Revenue and profit are different things. And a lot of those big clubs are now suddenly going, we wasted all the money, all the revenue we've made. We've blown it. We've mismanaged it, a bit of corruption in there. Some dodgy transfer dealings, agents fees, and we're out of money, so we want to make our own little private club. And then no one wanted to play. Man City are the same, but because they have Foden, people seem to think Pep trust. No, there's been a complete lack of development from that academy. The amount of money they put in there, it is literally just a tax dodge. It's a tax write-off. Man City can't even fill the Etihad, so let's not pretend that all the fan base has bought into Manchester City, because they haven't. I think a lot of fans missed the old Main Road and wish that there was investment in Main Road rather than just getting it. But they got the stadium for nothing, basically. But a lot of fans wish they had kept Main Road and still developed the area of Manchester they've redeveloped. But I think a lot of fans would have rather kept the old Main Road for the history and the culture and the community link, and they've lost that. And a lot of fans have they can't fill the Etihad. So, and then you have to ask the question, what's the ticket price? And they've not been successful every season since the takeover. And ironically, they could actually end up winning nothing this season. So that would be really hilarious. That really would. It really would actually be hilarious if they were in competition for 4 trophies a week and a half ago. And imagine if they end up with none. That would, well, apart from the League Cup, imagine at the start of the season they're in competition for 4 trophies. Imagine if they win none. That would really make me laugh. And it is plausible. It could happen. Liverpool are playing better right now. They've blown a double-digit points lead in the Premier League. And at the end of the day, just imagine if they actually come away with no trophies. Would that be Pep sacked? Not that I think he will, but that would be a disastrous end to a very dominant season for the first 3 quarters of it. That in the last couple of months, they've blown a double-digit points lead in the Premier League. And they've been shown up in the FA Cup semi-final so convincingly. That first 45 minutes, Liverpool won the game after 45 minutes. The fact that Liverpool allowed 2 sloppy goals is another thing, but they were done at half time. And Liverpool since then have just gone to another level. And Man City, while they've had an easier running, I think, haven't been on the same level. And there are some tough games that Man City have got to play. And if they slip up and draw a game, I think the title's done. I think they could blow the title. And the ramifications of that will be very severe. Plus, how long does Pep decide to stay at the club? Because he has stated with every contract Champions League. And if he don't win the Champions League this year, a lot of people say, oh, they're going to win the Champions League. They're not guaranteed. People were saying, oh, they're going to beat Liverpool in the FA Cup semi-final. And they got absolutely schooled. They got slaughtered in that first half. They got embarrassed. And it was very evident that they are an arrogant, overconfident, somewhat lazy club. And the lack of academy development is starting to hurt them. And some of the players that were playing in the FA Cup semi-final will not be there next season. Gabriel Jesus and Fernandinho are probably gone in the summer. And they are actually, ironically, key players for them. And I don't think Grealish has worked out. He's not as impactful on games as what he was at Villa because he's playing the wrong role. And the formation that Man City have, ironically, is, I think, if you play a style like Liverpool, and there are a few clubs in the Premier League that do, and are bogey teams for City, you can beat them and beat them easily. And that was shown up in the FA Cup semi-final. It was actually shown up in both Premier League games with Liverpool, even though both ended 2-2. There were clear deficiencies in the style of playing without a centre-forward striker that are shown up with the Liverpool style. Southampton play that style. Obviously, Liverpool play that style. I think Palace have played that style as well. And it is evident when you play, I think Wolves play that style at times. It is evident how you can outdo City with work rate, energy, and teamwork. You don't have to be necessarily the most skilled players to beat. You just have to be more disciplined than them. And isolate a couple of key players out of the game, and suddenly their so-called sexy passing football and possession football doesn't work. Because certain key players need to be involved in the build-up play. And if you isolate them out via effective blockings of the channels or effective man marking, Man City can't win. But you have to get it right. And that's where a lot of clubs get it wrong. They don't effectively isolate one or two key players in that setup. They need to block the passing channels, block the runs, and mark certain players. They can't operate. The reason why City are successful is not every team can be that, don't have that defensive focus and that defensive off-the-ball energy that Liverpool and Wolves and there's a few other clubs that have upset City in recent years have. Desire is another thing. That's why Man United are nowhere close to City's. They don't have the desire, the work rate, and the energy. Whereas Liverpool have all that. And that's a bit that goes a long way to defeat City. You have to be the most skillful, you just have to be more committed than them. Stick to your processes and game plan and you will do them. Because they will get frustrated because they have had too many easy results where teams sit back, 2 banks of 4, maybe 2 banks of 5 and 1 centre forward for a dodgy counter attack, the long ball, and they sit there. And generally the long ball player is a slow lumbering Lukaku type player who just uses physical brute force rather than actually having a player like a Jamie Vardy who will just rip the defence to pieces. You need a Jamie Vardy style lone striker possibly for that long ball where he just runs in behind. And the defence can't cope because John Stones is overrated. Otamendi's chaotic. What's his name? The French, Basque, Spanish. What's his name? Laporte isn't consistent enough. Overrated. Kyle Walker's probably busy being a slime bag with drugs and prostitutes. And they miss Vincent Kompany. They miss Lee Michaelis. They miss those solid, proper centre-backs who weren't the most skillful, but had good spatial awareness and good organisational skills. They miss them. But Guardiola's got this obsession with everyone's got to be this slick, silky passer of the ball. It doesn't work. Sometimes put it in Rosette. Honestly, sometimes just leather it. You'd have to be slick and sexy and skillful 100% of the time, because eventually, as we saw in the FA Cup semi-final with Zach Steffen, and we saw in the league game with Edison, it goes horribly wrong. Their obsession with the sweeper keeper. Stop it. You need a plan B and a plan C, and they don't have that. They constantly do the silly back passes. They constantly overplay because they're arrogant, overconfident, and that's what's undoing them. And the press, the sports press, are so far up Guardiola's backside. It's frustrating, because guess what? There's 91 other Football League clubs. There's a handful of clubs that get a lot of attention unnecessarily because of their history in the game, or the amount of money they have, or who the manager is, or who the star player is. And actually, there's like 90 odd other clubs that play in the Football League structure that deserve, I think, an equal share of attention. Just saying. The media bias is frustrating, and we're going to get it. And I think clubs like Leicester and clubs like Crystal Palace and West Ham and Wolves, admittedly Wolves have obviously got their off-field financial fair play breaches, but Wolves, Southampton, Brentford have had a very good first season back in top flight since 1948, do not get the attention they deserve for the work they do on and off the field, and the culture that those clubs have, the work rate of the players. The fact they're now starting to retain, actually sign big name players for the first time in a long time. The connection with their fan base, the investment they've made in the local communities where they play, don't get the attention they should do because of the obsession with the two Manchester clubs and Merseyside, and some of the other London clubs that flatter to deceive. It's ridiculous. The media obsession with a handful of clubs in London and a handful of clubs in the Northwest is just perverse. Absolutely perverse. And I just do not understand it, because it gives a false representation about what the sport is about and what the sporting culture in this country is about. And there are some great feel-good stories like a Leicester, like a Brentford, like a Crystal Palace under Vieira. Their form under Vieira since the turn of the year is fantastic. They didn't play at their best in the semi-final. I think they should have possibly got to the FA Cup final, but Conor Gallagher being cup tied and Chelsea not giving permission for him to play, I think, was not right, because he'd not played a single game for Chelsea this season. That I think hurt them in that semi-final against Chelsea, and I think was morally wrong. I think the FA needs to look at those rules when it comes to the loan system. I honestly do. I really do think that. I think the situation with the media bias when it comes to headlines. So when Man United got beaten by Watford, they didn't praise Watford for the 4-1. They were obsessed with Man United's performance, but did not give praise to Ranieri at the time and what that Watford performance meant, because it cost Solskjaer his job. But they were obsessed with Man United and gave no credit to how well Watford played that day. It's the same with Palace, Chelsea. Or Palace are unlucky, but all about Chelsea and how the players have overcome all the off-field dramas. Well, Palace have really gone out of business multiple times in the last 2 decades, but no credit was given to Vieira and the work rate and the effort that club had put in under Vieira's management. There was absolutely no focus put on what Brentford have done, really. There was a few headlines, and it's gone quiet because their bigger neighbours are Chelsea. Yeah, the culture of that club is completely different to Stamford Bridge. Completely a different culture, much more linked with the community. It's been a long wait since they were last in the top flight. Most of the fan base weren't even alive when they were last in the top flight. It's been a long time where they've been in the lower divisions. They've got a fantastic brand new stadium, because Griffin Park, you just couldn't redevelop that and expand on that because the site it was in and it was crumbling. The effort they put on and off the pitch Not enough. The media circus surrounding Spurs, as I say, there's about 80 odd other clubs with all great histories, apart from MK Dons, in the Football League, and some in the, a fair few in the non-league, that also deserve, be it positive or negative, doesn't matter, media attention and discussion. And it doesn't happen. It just does not happen. And that is absolutely frustrating when our national sport, we have the biggest player depth outside of Brazil. I'm not joking on that. Because Brazil is a religion as well. It's the national sport in Brazil. You've got the most professional clubs for 100,000 people. We've got the deepest talent depth for professional players. We've got the most lucrative league structure for overseas TV rights and overseas investment. Allegedly, the Premier League is the best product, but I've seen so many really shockingly poor quality games in the Premier League over the years where I'm just like, this is meant to be the best football in the world, isn't it? This is painful viewing. Look at the European success our clubs have had historically in all European competitions, not just the Champions League, but you've got, Europa League, Cup, the old UEFA Cup and the old Cup Winners' Cup. Look at the successes that's been had there. And just ridiculous. And then we look at the ownership problems that the sport has, and the financial mismanagement over many years. It's chronic, absolutely chronic. And half the clubs that were involved in the European Super League were English, which is just a stain on the game. Absolute stain on the game. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. I don't want to rant too much about it, but regardless of that, we should be proud of our sports, our history within the sport, and the success that our clubs have had, both domestically, all of our clubs, and in Europe. And we've got to take the highs with the lows, and there's been a lot of negative headlines as well. And again, it is what it is. And a handful of clubs have their own dedicated journalists from the mainstream media, basically based there, and it is absolutely frustrating when, as I say, there's 92 Football League clubs, and then there's a whole host in the non-league that are fully professional that have been in the Football League, and the attention is on a handful, and they dominate the media pages. When you want to find news about your club, you have to really dig, and then you find a really badly written article, and it really frustrates me. And some of the clubs that have been mentioned that have got all these issues off the field that have been badly run and are now struggling in the lower divisions when they shouldn't be. That's true, they shouldn't be. It is just frustrating, and I don't know where the sport goes from here. We are at a crossroads, both domestically and with UEFA, and to a certain extent with FIFA as well, because a lot hinges on this World Cup. A lot hinges on their proposal, because it is a proposal. It is a research project of having a 2-year World Cup cycle. And while I do think more African sides should qualify for the World Cup, they should. You need to look at the qualification structures and then the FIFA coefficient, and then how South America and Europe get more teams qualify for the World Cup over Africa. You have to look at that, absolutely. But looking at the African Cup of Nations quality at the beginning of the year, it was so poor. I can see why less African sides make it to the World Cup, because the quality was not good enough for some of the world-class players that Africa has produced. I'm sorry, I watched a fair bit of that tournament, and it was just really shocking how poor the quality was. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But while I understand from an African point of view, yes, there should be more African nations at the World Cup. Absolutely. But the majority of top quality talent is South American and European, and that's what the overseas North American market is investing in. That's the games they want to watch. That's the leagues they want to watch when they're watching overseas non-MLS football. That's what they're interested in. And what is also interesting, as I've discussed in previous live streams, is I do honestly believe when UEFA implements their new spending cap rules, right, when they do implement their new spending rules in a year or so's time, I think the MLS will be the league that benefits the most, because the European leagues will have to cut their expenditure and be profitable. All the clubs will have to be profitable. So that's where I see the MLS with its growing viewership figures and expansion, because there's 17% more in the last calendar year over the year before in viewership. Viewership has gone up by 17% in 2 years, because I'm also including the COVID in there and the pre-COVID. Viewership's gone up. Fan numbers have gone up. Now, yes, expansion of the league. Absolutely, that has an impact. Expansion of the league. David Beckham now having a team in Nashville, a team in Atlanta, a team in Miami, big metropolitan areas. That has had a positive impact, absolutely. But when you're getting 70,000 in Atlanta for a home game, right? Absolutely, you're going to get viewership up, because Atlanta is one of the biggest sports market in the US. I can see a benefit for the MLS is more top quality European based talent, be it South American or European players or even African players, ending up in the MLS, because the UEFA based clubs are going to have to reduce their expenditure. And we could see a player exodus of high quality players. They might be towards the end of their careers, they might be in the mid stage of their careers. I could see a high quality exodus of players to the MLS, which will ultimately benefit the MLS itself, because it will get more fans going to games and more kids wanting to play the game at a higher level. So you get more Christian Pulisic's coming through, more Tim Howard's in goal, more Clint Dempsey's, more Brian McBride's. I'm naming some top quality US players that have been produced over the last 30 years. Right, you get more kids wanting to emulate those US players that have gone and played in Europe at the highest level, and the quality of the product on the field will ultimately improve. And the players around these quality players will up their level of training, professionalism, diet, and they will want to get better. And with the Canadians now qualifying for their first World Cup since 1986, at a canter, by the way, and are the informed team right now internationally, and the US bouncing back from missing out the last World Cup, I can see the MLS and even the Mexican League massively benefiting from hosting the World Cup in 4 years' time, and the new UEFA spending rules coming into force. I can see a net benefit for North American football or soccer. True, however, it's the franchise model, and the North American model is different, and we have discussed this. I've discussed this on videos in the past. The sports model is different. You pay an expansion fee to enter the league. If a team is struggling financially or success in their location, the owner will sell up or relocate the team. Their sports culture is different, so unfortunately, promotion relegation will not happen, even though it possibly should and probably would work. It's against their sporting culture, and that is one of the reasons why the quality of the sport is less over there than over here. However, the MLS is a very fun league to watch. It's a very open style of play. They play at a slightly higher pace. And yes, the skill level and the quality level is not as good. But as a neutral watching it, it actually is very, very entertaining. For the MLS games I have seen, it is actually quite an entertaining league to watch. It really is. And the sport is growing massively in the US in the last 20 years. Massive. Big part of that was David Beckham. Another follow-on was players like Kaká and Pirlo and Ibrahimovic in recent years, and Gerrard and Lampard's had a go at it, and Andrea Pirlo, and you've had some proper good players play over there for a season or two or longer, and have definitely raised the quality level of the players around them. And again, fans over there are now hardcore fans now, and the sport is growing. So there are some negatives with the franchise system, and we can all agree on that. But I think they are going to massively benefit from UEFA's new spending rules when UEFA has to impose these rules on clubs and they have to cut their expenditure to become profitable, which means either players' salaries get cut or they go, we're going to release you. We can't afford to pay your wages. And a player will just go, right, I'm going to get where I can get paid. And with the revenues going up with the MLS and viewership going up and expansion, if they can attract some more big name players and some good young talent as well, because I think getting some good young European and South American talent to go over there will boost the image of their sport and improve the quality. Yeah, I can see this is a crossroads for the sport. It's a crossroads for the sport, absolutely. The direction the sport takes, both in Europe and in North America, is hinging on the next couple of years. I'll be back in a second. I've got to do my recycling. Oh. Toilet break. Oh, I'm back. But no, I think teams in the small markets like Salt Lake, Cincinnati, Orlando, and Nashville can't. Well, you say that. You do say that, but Salt Lake City's had an Olympics, so that is where a lot of the investment for Salt Lake City has come, and they've been aside for Real Salt Lake have been aside for a very long time. Cincinnati, yeah, and Orlando, for some reason, the Florida teams always struggle for attendance, regardless of the sport. Always struggle for attendance. The Tampa Bay Lightning, for example, very successful team in the NHL. Okay, they've won 2 Stanley Cups in a row, and they're one of the best teams in the league with the team they built in the NHL. They are still giving away discounted tickets to high schools and kindergartens and universities to fill their arena. At one point, they were giving tickets away for free. The Florida Panthers, another very good team right now in the regular season, and if they win a playoff series for the first time since '96, which they're looking very likely to do, they can't fill their arena, partly because of the location it's in Sunrise, which is a satellite city of Miami. For some reason, the Miami Heat, the Marlins in Major League Baseball, Tampa Bay Rays, the Buccaneers, the Jacksonville Jaguars, doesn't matter what the sport is in Florida, NBA, NFL, NHL, Major League Soccer, there's no Major League Rugby teams there, which is interesting. Major League Baseball, although I think that will change. They never sell out. There is a massive problem with Florida with the fact they've had some very successful teams in a variety of the major leagues. They struggle to make attendance figures, regardless of the success of the team that they have in regular or postseason. They do struggle to sell out arenas, even when they're winning championships and winning division titles and getting to playoffs. They just attendance figures in Florida are really just a head scratcher. And I don't know how you fix that in Florida, because they've got a lot of sporting infrastructure down there, but they just cannot fill arenas and fill stadiums. And it's a head scratcher for me when they've had all this success over with all these various major leagues down there, the Dolphins. They can't sell out stadiums and arenas, and you have to start asking the question, why? Is it ticket price? Is it demographic? Age demographic, ethnicity, nationality demographic? That's where you have to start asking, the question, why are we not? Because they've got a great NCAA university program in Florida. They've got a great climate in Florida, a very attractive tax system in Florida. If you're a free agent player, whatever sport, a lot of the Major League Baseball has one of their, the Eastern Conference training camps in Florida. The NFL has a combine that, at the moment they think about rotating around cities, but they've had Super Bowls in Florida. They've had some very successful teams in Florida, and the question is, why they have been forced to give away discounted tickets at below league average or free tickets, and why they can't fill arenas when all the major leagues, excluding I will class Major League Rugby as one of the pro leagues, why they've got all these professional leagues in there. They've got training camps. They have league combines. drafts, you name it. They've had everything in Florida, and yet they cannot fill stadiums. It's real head scratcher, real head scratcher. In regards to other locations in the US and Canada, it's what it is. But as I say, the North American sports model is completely different to the European and South American in every way. No, the Dolphins have had success, and I've got some Dolphins. I've got Dolphins jerseys on. The Jags are hopeless, and they've always been hopeless. And I don't think it helped when their owner, who also owns Fulham, wanted to buy Wembley, and there was a lot of rumours about the team ending up in London. I don't think it's done anything for the local fan base wanting to support the team. And the fact they've only made the postseason, I think, like 3 or 4 times in their existence, made the postseason, tells you all you need to know about how badly run the team is and how poor the team is. And while they've agreed to play regular season games in London until 2024 or 2025 or something, and they've made this extension on their long-term commitment post 2024 I think it's 2024 or 2025, post the 24-25 season, they have not committed to further games in London as part of the London series at Wembley. They have not committed to that. And that is where either the Khan family are considering selling the franchise, or the plan by the NFL to have a team in London is going to be completely shelved or scrapped. Because I've done research on the proposal to have an NFL team in London, and that window that they wanted to have a team by has long passed now, by over a decade. They wanted a team in London over a decade ago. Now, the fact they are still committed to the London series tells you something about, okay, here's a moneymaker for that league. It does make the league a lot of money. It creates a lot of interest. It's a big overseas thing. They've tapped into the UK market. Fair play to them. Do I think the Magic's worn off? Absolutely. Absolutely. That the gimmick has worn off a little bit. And with the rising cost of living, and you have to look at ticket prices. I did that with the Major League Baseball London series. And one of the big talking points that I think a lot of people raised was the cheaper tickets sold out almost immediately, and then the rest of the tickets was like 1 to 2 weeks' wages for your average salary. You know, and I could never go to a Major League Baseball or a London Series game. I mean, my mate Ollie, he went to every single London Series game from 2007 till I think 2013, 2014. And I said to him, "I was like, are you going next year? And you going the year on? You know, are you going to get? I can't." And he's on a 5-6 figure salary as a corporate accountant, so he's on good money. He works for one of our big supermarkets in their corporate accounts department. And I said to him, this is going back 4-5 years. I said, are you going to be going this year? This is pre-COVID. And he goes, no, I can't afford to go anymore. And I'm thinking, you're on anywhere between 60 and 100 grand a year. You've got a nice BMW Z4 convertible soft top, which is worth a fair chunk of cash as a car. The top end M series one. I'm like, so you've got a top end car that costs silly money. You are on a top salary for your age. And I'm thinking to myself, and you can't afford to go, and you're on a salary that's 3, 4, 5 times mine for what I do as a job. And he's like, yeah, I can't afford to go anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that sums up, hey, how expensive ticket prices are. That sums up how I think fans are starting to tire from the experience. I think there's market saturation now. There's only so much you can do, unless they do expand the league to 32 teams, and then you've got so far 2 teams haven't played a game in London yet. And I think COVID impacted when teams were going to come over, and in order for the league, I think, to attract extra revenue and new fans, they've got to expand to 32 teams, because the NHL now has done that and has made a lot of money out of expansion. And as I say, I think fans are starting to tire of 3 to 4 games a season in London, and I think ticket price is a massive part of it. And when my mate Ollie, who's a die-hard NFL fan, he's a Steelers fan through and through. He's actually been on live TV dressed as a penguin. One year he went dressed as a bottle of beer. They go in fancy dress every year. They used to go in fancy dress every year. I think one year they did, the Lion King style onesies and all that. And this is pre-COVID and pre all this massive inflation. So it's only Green Bay, one of the most successful historical teams in the NFL, that has not played in London. That is a shocker. And they are the smallest market in the NFL as well, Green Bay. They're the smallest major league market in the US. So if Green Bay are one of the most successful teams, you have Lambeau Field, and of course the Lombardi Trophy is named after their former coach, one of the most successful teams of all time, historically, has not played in London, that tells you that they're obsessive with Jacksonville playing a home game every season, I think is starting to wear thin. They're one of the most supported teams outside of the US for overseas fan base. There's your answer. And when my mate Ollie did say, I can't afford it anymore, I'm not going anymore. I cannot afford it, even on a decent salary with, his expenditure, actually, his outward expenditure isn't actually that bad. But when my mate Ollie said, I can no longer afford this, about 4 or 5 years ago, so just before, a couple of years before COVID, or a year or two before COVID, that tells you and told me that the London series model with ticket pricing and the merchandising and everything, I think, has run its course. Unless they add new franchises to the league, like another team back in St. Louis and Portland, or Sacramento, or anywhere. That tells you, I think, that the London series is starting to wear thin, and it's almost impossible for someone on my salary, for example, on a lower salary, to go financially. To go would be half a month's wages for everything. It's just something I cannot justify. Green Bay only agreed to go if they are the away side because they have sold out season tickets. There you go, and they have a smaller catchment area for Green Bay, which is the smallest market for Major League Sports in the US. And because they've already promised their season ticket holders for the next 3 years, tickets, they have to be the away side. And then that comes down to fixturing, and then you would have to go, okay, who in their division or their conference could be the home side for that fixture? And would it come in the right time frame to be the London series? Now, that's up to the NFL. The NFL has said all teams should have played in London, but of course COVID has obviously impacted that. Should have played in London by this point. COVID's obviously had that impact. But that if they're sticking to that, and if the NFL is serious with every team getting at least one game in London to say, right, we've done the whole league's been done now, we've sold the product as far as we can, 30 teams, they would have to expand to 32, and then go from there. But that tells you where the league's at. That tells you that Green Bay have basically said to the NFL, we cannot be the home side because we are then basically screwing over our fans. We are the smallest market. We have to be the away team. But Green Bay not playing in London with one of the bigger overseas fan bases globally is a head scratcher for me. They should have already been there. They should have been front and centre against, let's say, the Patriots or whatever team. The Dolphins. Imagine Green Bay versus the Miami Dolphins. Two really successful franchises of our youth, basically, or my youth, basically. Is a head scratcher for me. It really is. Green Bay versus Minnesota. There you go. The Vikings versus Green Bay Packers. That is one of the most heated rivalries in the NFL. That would put bums on seats. And what is so surprising is they haven't tried it. They haven't taken Green Bay there yet, and they know the situation with Green Bay. They know they've obviously got the smallest catchment area. They're the smallest major league city in the US. Actually, the whole of North America, actually, for population. They are the smallest location for a major league franchise. Buffalo is bigger. Ottawa is bigger in North America. But then you look at Major League Baseball and how they were so late to the party and how poorly their initial London series went back in 2019. And ticket price was a big thing. And taxpayer money funding for the reconfiguration of the London City Stadium. British taxpayers paid a fair proportion of the reconfiguration to a baseball field at that stadium. And a lot of people missed that, but I picked up on that. And I said, if more people have picked up on this, there'll be more of a negative reaction towards Major League Baseball, one of the wealthiest leagues for revenue there is in North America, and they're expecting us, the taxpayer, to fund their little ego boost overseas. That to me, not good enough. And considering how the owners have acted over the Christmas period, New Year period with the lockout, Major League Baseball's done a lot of damage to their reputation, both domestically and overseas. So yeah, there is that. But no, I mean, I think when we look at the governance side of the sport, the two major leagues that come out best when it comes to governance is the NBA and the NHL. And the NHL's got a lot of problems. There's been a lot of scandal in the last couple of years with the NHL, with off-ice incidents with teams and coaches and culture in the sport. There were talks about Tottenham hosting the 2027 Super Bowl. Interested if they get. I will do a video on, a Super Bowl in London because Tottenham have signed for 2 games per season, and that's basically to pay off the stadium debt. Again, Tottenham is run as a corporate club rather than a footballing club. They're run as a business club now, hence why Tottenham hasn't won anything, because they don't actually properly invest on the footballing side. They do a lot of business on the corporate side, and they do a lot of business with buying players cheaper and selling them for a profit. And that's, well, it'll be interesting. I mean, look, I can look into whether in 5 years' time the Super Bowl's played in London. I mean, if it is, look, that debate's been had since they first came to London in 2007. So that will be 20 years since they first played a game in London. That will be a very fitting time to do it. It's been 15 years since they first played a game in London. On the 20th anniversary season, possibly, you could argue that's deliberately timed by the NFL. Now, whether, because I think they've changed the way that they award their Super Bowl to cities now. The thing is, the time of year the Super Bowl is played, we're more likely to get snow, and that's something the NFL wants to avoid, is the Super Bowl being played in snowy conditions. And if you look at the history of both my channels, both this one and the History Boffin, look when the snowstorms hit. Look at the dates of when we have bad weather in January, February, and March. The Super Bowl was played in February. We've had heavy snow in February before in the last 5-6 years, and I've recorded every time we have a heavy snowstorm. Phone comes out and I record it. And since 2018, the bad weather, the amount of times I've recorded the bad weather, and it's not in December, it's not in January. Well, it's been a fair bit in January, but it's mostly February and March that we have heavy snow. And I'm like, phone's out. And I live in the southeast. London's in the southeast. And you look at the Super Bowl locations, Green Bay and Buffalo are never getting a Super Bowl because it'll be minus 40. And you'll be, it's to do with the weather conditions. They will try and go for warmer climates or an indoor stadium like Atlanta, for example. Certain cities will never get a Super Bowl ever again because the weather conditions just aren't good for the NFL to play in winter. And actually, it'll probably make it a better game, more of a test of not only the players but the conditions. Can you imagine Super Bowl at Wembley or White Hart Lane and kickoff? It's getting cold. Suddenly the snow comes down and comes down heavily. That would really be embarrassing for the NFL, because the cities they choose either have a fully indoor stadium like Atlanta, for example, and Minnesota, or they're in warmer climates like California or Florida, or one of the coastal cities like or in Texas, where it doesn't snow as much and there's less chance of having that bad weather. But as I say, if it is then put pen to paper, because I think the Super Bowl cities get announced 3 years ahead of time. So in 2 years' time, if they say London is going to be the location, be it Wembley or Twickenham, now Twickenham won't be allowed because the Six Nations. It would have to be the London City. Actually, then you've got from There's only 3 stadiums they could use for a Super Bowl. And that's White Hart Lane, because of the interchangeable pitch, Wembley, and the London City Stadium, because you can adjust the seating. It has retractable and movable seating. And even then, West Ham are the primary tenants, and the contract basically states that they get priority, and then Rugby League and Rugby Union get secondary. So it'll be interesting to see if, yes, because there's no internationals in February in the international window, and so and that's why games get played at Wembley when they do. One of the reasons why, and it's a corporate decision, they redid White Hart Lane, was for the NFL money. Levy was making deals with the NFL, and so if we redevelop our stadium to NFL standard, would you be willing to play half your London Series games per year at our stadium when you expand to 4 games per season? And the NFL went yes. Now, they've reduced the NFL games to 1 at Wembley and 2 at Tottenham, and that is they've gone down to 3 for some reason. COVID's obviously having an impact with that. Wembley is possible. Wembley is the bigger stadium and has hosted more NFL games over White Hart Lane. And they've obviously got that connection with the FA, and they've got that relationship with the FA of the NFL. So there is that working relationship that's been cemented over a 15-year period. And one of the reasons why the NFL goes to Wembley was to pay off the stadium debt of Wembley. Now that's been paid, we may see more of a shift to White Hart Lane, but I'm surprised the Emirates hasn't hosted NFL games, because the NFL started coming to London in 2007. The Emirates opened in 2006. So I'm surprised the Emirates hasn't been used, because it's, again, the right dimensions. And it is being used for the Rugby League World Cup this autumn. So, yes, but New York is less likely. It's more coastal, so the snow is more likely to fall asleep, and you're more likely to get that coastal variation with the weather, with the Gulf Stream. But when it does snow in New York, it comes down, as Buffalo will attest, and New York and Albany, because Dan, one of our moderators, is from Albany in mid-state New York, and they've had a lot of snow in the last couple of weeks. So, but as I say, it's more likely to snow after February the 1st than before February the 1st. We're more likely to have snow on Valentine's Day and Easter than at Christmas and New Year's. And that proved, the other week it was snowing. Not a lot, but the temperature went from 20 odd degrees the week before, mid-teens to 20 degrees, to minus degrees, and snow showers every 20 minutes for 8 hours of the day. We had those massive storms back in February, where we had 4 storms in the space of 12 days. And the weather is meant to turn this week, and we're meant to have some stormy weather, worse up north and more rain south, but we could have snow on the moors in around Manchester and Yorkshire and the Peak District. So, and we're basically at the beginning of May next week, and there's a chance of snow within the next couple of days in the Midlands and the north. So the weather is very changeable. I mean, look at the amount of rain Australia's East Coast has had. People have died in the floods over there, and it has impacted the sport, the sports landscape. But no, it will be interesting if Tottenham or Wembley get or London in general as a city gets a Super Bowl. And I could do, a video on it and do some digging, because, as I say, the NFL wanted to have a team in London by now. And that was part of the premise of when they came in 2007. That was the initial. Then they extended the contract, and then they realised they couldn't sell enough tickets because the stadium was sold out. There was a waiting list for tickets for the following year and the year after. So they worked out that there was an urge to have it, but what I now find interesting is my mate Ollie, as I say, is a diehard NFL fan. Diehard. And I asked him, are you still going to the NFL games? And he said, no, I can't afford it. And he's, as I say, on a much higher salary than me. Now, we've got this cost of living crisis. We've got inflation going up to the highest level in 30 years. Inflation's outstripping wages for the first time since the 70s. And as I say, like, if I was to go to one of the NFL London games, that's half a month's wages. And same with the Major League Baseball. If they do decide next year to come back to London in the regular season, which I think is on the cards, that is half a month's wages. Well, Toronto, I'm not sure how the CFL would feel about having an NFL franchise in their back garden, because the NFL tried everything to kill off the CFL in the US, and it succeeded, and it damn near killed the league. I'm not sure how the CFL would feel about the NFL crossing north of the border, because the NFL did their best and succeeded in almost destroying the CFL when they went south of the border about 20-odd years ago. 25 years ago, the CFL was having bumper profits and was actually doing really well. The NHL lockouts were having an impact. The strike of the NHL lockout of the mid-90s had an impact. Fans were frustrated. The second major sport in Canada is the CFL, the Canadian Football League. And then with this surge in popularity the CFL had in the 90s, they decided to expand in the US and take the NFL on its own game. And it damn near killed the league, and the NFL did its utmost to really destroy the CFL and damn near succeeded. And now the league is smaller than what it was. Most of the teams are in financial peril, and they didn't have a season in 2020, so the league is basically broke. But I'm not sure how the Canadian sports market would feel, because, as I say, Buffalo and Vancouver, a lot of Seattle Toronto and Vancouver are basically on the Canadian-US border. And as you say, Seattle, there's a big Canadian following in Seattle for the Seattle teams in general, plural, for all the Seattle major league teams. Even though Vancouver's got the Canucks and they've got the MLS franchise, I forget the name of it, and they've got the CFL as well, and all that. A lot of Vancouverites and British Columbians from BC go south of the border when possible to watch the Seahawks. The Seawolves play Major League Rugby. The Seattle Sounders in the MLS. I forget the Major League Baseball team in Seattle. The NBA has left Seattle now. They moved on, but bugs. But when the border was open before COVID, a load of people from British Columbia would support the Seattle-based teams, and even as far as Portland. Same with Buffalo. A huge proportion of their fan base, be it the Sabres and the Bills, are from the Toronto and Hamilton metropolitan area in southern Ontario. So, and the rest of the American football fans follow the CFL. But yeah, there's only, and then you've got to try and convert the domestic Canadian fans away from the Seahawks and the Buffalo Bills to another NFL franchise. And I don't think that works, because you've got the NHL and CFL are the established leagues with dedicated hardcore fan bases, plus the Canadian markets outside of Toronto and Vancouver, ironically, are limited in size, like Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Calgary, and Ottawa, and even to a certain extent Montreal and Quebec, just cannot compete, because it costs more money to run a major league franchise in Canada over the US, because the salaries, if it's like the MLS and the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NHL, are paid in US dollars, and it costs more to run a Canadian team than an American team in those leagues. And on top of that, you've got the higher tax rates in Canada that put off free agents. So the teams you can put together to compete maybe have less talent. And then you've got to compete against the NHL, which is almost a religion. And to a certain extent, Toronto will support anything. But you've got the Blue Jays, you've got the Raptors, the Maple Leafs always sell out. You've got the Argonauts in the CFL, you've got the Toronto Arrows in Major League Rugby, you've got Toronto FC in the MLS. how many more major league? I mean, there's a debate whether you could have a second team, NHL team, for example, in Toronto, because Hamilton, as part of the Toronto metropolitan area, is a huge city in its own right. But outside of Toronto, Vancouver notwithstanding, I don't think, from what I can gather online and what I can gather with fans on social media, that there's an actual appetite for the NFL to put a team in Canada. Because where do you go? Because the CFL will probably resist, the NHL will definitely resist, and the Canadian market is a smaller population size, and then you've got lesser corporate money in Canada. And then you've got to find arena availability. And I'm not sure the Toronto Argonauts want to share their arena, their stadium, which they already share with a few other sports teams. I think Toronto FC and Toronto Arrows. Toronto Arrows use their training ground. I'm not sure that the other sports that are in Toronto want to share their facilities, so that the Argonauts, the Arrows, and the Toronto FC with an NFL team. And the NFL is a winter sport, and the weather in Toronto gets very, very cold. The weather in Canada, very cold, especially Ontario and Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Alberta. We're talking, I think, a couple of years ago in Winnipeg, it hit like minus 56 Celsius. And I had subscribers, again, I've got a fair following in Canada. And I had subscribers and viewers of live streams and videos that is going, it's minus 56 right now. And I'll be commenting on other YouTubers, and we're discussing, I think one of them was like, where in the world are people from? Please leave in the comments on my live stream. I said, I'm from the UK. So it's this temperature here, because we were having a cold snap at the time. Well, it's probably roughly the same time I was doing some of my weather videos on both channels. And I got response from someone, I think it was a Winnipeg live stream. He goes, look, it's minus 56 Celsius right now, man. I'm like, shh. It's minus 10 here, and it was 46 degrees lower in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So you can just imagine how, let's say you have an NFL team in Toronto or Winnipeg or Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton. How would that work when the Buffalo Bills and the Green Bay Packers, and they're playing in the conditions they play in, they have to shovel snow off and it's below freezing, and so maybe there can't be any fans in attendance. Just imagine trying to play that in Canada. It's further north, it's colder. It's not workable. That's another reason why. Yes, the Canadian Premier League is expanding and new smaller stadiums have been built. Yes, yeah, that's a legacy of the Women's World Cup as well. They had in 2017, I believe, or 2015. I think it was 2014. I'm trying to remember when the Women's FIFA World Cup was, and it's bugging me now. It's 2019. So I think it was 2013. That's a legacy of the Women's FIFA World Cup in Canada. But there was a lot of complaints about the playing surfaces. They're playing a lot on the Astros. Again, the 3G pitches because of the weather conditions in winter. But yes, currently 8 teams, but new stadium. Vancouver's got a great indoor arena that they play rugby union and football in. But there is a big debate about Canadian sports facilities. The Women's Football World Cup, there's a lot of complaints about the playing surfaces they were playing on. But yeah, I completely understand the Canadian football doing rather well. It's the same with the US minor leagues that they have, the US Football League or whatever it is, or Soccer League, below the MLS. There is definitely a good second tier both in the US and Canada for player development. And that is absolutely fantastic. And the benefits are now being felt by the US and Canadian national sides. There's definitely a benefit in both the women's and men's game with the new facilities, new infrastructure, and the growth in the sport. And a part of that is obviously you've got the World Cup in 4 years' time. They need to get facilities ready for that to FIFA standard, and the legacy of the Women's Football World Cup, 6 years ago. So yes, 6-7 years ago. So yes. Got a World Cup coming up. They've had a World Cup in the women's game. That's the legacy, and also part of the reason why they won the bid was they had successfully hosted the women's game. That bug is going to die a horrible death soon. I will kill it. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why. And so they're getting this infrastructure. Yes, they might be smaller stadiums or whatever. However, I'm saying that there's been a lot of investment in their CFL stadiums and Major League Soccer stadiums anyway. There's been a massive investment pumped into a lot of the facilities that their CFL and Major League Soccer teams play in over the last decade or so, partly through the Women's World Cup, and they won when they were announced as the bid winners for the 2026 World Cup alongside the US and Mexico. Big surge of investment in infrastructure. So local and provincial and national government in Canada has definitely put a lot into stadium infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, the BC Place is a fantastic facility. It is. I've seen rugby union on the internet. I remember when the US playing Canada in a test match there, a competitive test match, and the Canadians playing Uruguay there, and it was sold. It was massive. Still 10K. 10K is not a bad capacity for a minority sport in a country that is obsessed with NHL and CFL. That is not that. Honestly, that is not a bad stadium capacity, considering the limited population size of Canada in comparison to the US. But that is not a bad average stadium size. That's equivalent to like League One, League Two, lower Championship level stadium. That's not bad. That's quite an acceptable stadium size for your average professional football club. That's a mid-range professional football club outside the top flight. That is actually not a bad bit of investment on a regional level. That's actually quite good. And the fact that the Canadian provincial and national government have put and city governance as well has put a lot of energy into these infrastructure projects is a good thing. It is showing a willingness, I think, that's, again, it's part of the prep for the World Cup, training bases and such, and it's a legacy of the women's game. And the Canadian women's team is actually rather good. So that's now having a positive impact. Now, a lot of fans of football slate the women's game, but this is a positive byproduct of hosting an international tournament. The women's team obviously having success at the Olympics, and their men's team now having success qualifying for the World Cup. The groundwork and the grassroots has been built up over a long period of time, and now the results are being seen on the field. So that can only be positive. It can only be positive. Now, hopefully, long term, they continue to invest in the infrastructure and continue to invest in the sport. And if the Canadians have a very good World Cup, which we hope they do, and I hope they make the knockout stages and actually cause an upset in said knockout stages, that will only benefit the sport further. And the way the Canadians played in qualifying against some very established, better teams is a real positive. And first World Cups of 1986, I hope they do something. They're not going to win it, obviously, but I hope they have a good tournament and a positive tournament. And out of that, we can, see the positive growth of the sport in Canada leading into the next World Cup, which they are co-hosting. You want to see that, continued development and improvement. And part of development improvement is investing in the grassroots and the professional infrastructure domestically. And I think we're starting to see the fruits of that labour, which is a massive positive. But we'll have to see how it all goes. And when all the teams are fully qualified for the World Cup, we can have a look at previewing the group stage and previewing the tournament and prepping ourselves for the World Cup this winter. But of course, the Rugby League World Cup comes first, and I want to see that be a success as well, because the sport in rugby league needs a massive shot in the arm. And there's a big discussion in Australia about hosting games in the US and taking games to the US. A lot of discussion over there about taking NRL games to the US. And can you just imagine 100,000 people at Soldier Field in Chicago watching, the Roosters versus the Rabbitohs, or the Melbourne Storm playing Cronulla, or just the Penrith Panthers playing Parramatta. Can you imagine that? I think that'd be a fantastic. I mean, imagine Magic Round being played. So all the teams are playing. Now, obviously, next season onwards, it'll be 17 teams because the Redcliffe Dolphins are joining the league. But can you imagine when they add that 18th team in a couple of years playing Magic Round in a stadium like Soldier Field in Chicago, or the LA Coliseum, or what replaces the LA Coliseum? Can you just imagine that atmosphere? Can you actually imagine, the crowd numbers? That would be fantastic. And if the NRL are deadly serious, and I think they are looking into the option of taking games to the US, much like the NFL has been overseas to Europe, and the NBA, and now Major League Baseball and the NHL. The NRL has a lot to gain as the number one rugby league. It does, and I think the global growth of the sport is tied to the NRL now. A Super League has tried and failed miserably with the Wolfpack and the Ottawa races in the last couple of years. That's been an expensive failure. That's damaged the reputation of the league, both domestically and internationally. If we are to grow the game, it has to be NRL led, because the International Rugby League is broke, and the Super League is in financial distress. I think the NRL has to be the league that drives the sport forward, because the way the Super League is run and the financial issues the Super League is facing, it just cannot compete with the NRL. And it does have a lot to gain by taking games to the US. When play resumes 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. Sorry, just under 2 years ago. Sorry, at the end of May in 2020. The US Canadian sports markets, they had no sport to watch. The NHL, still no return to play protocols. The NBA, no return to play protocols. Major League Soccer had to come up with its mini tournament in Florida. So at that time, season couldn't start. Major League Baseball the season couldn't start, almost didn't start. The NFL was in the off season, didn't overly impact the NFL at the time, but their off season was impacted. The NRL, and then followed by the AFL, were the first two major professional leagues that have a global audience restarted. And the Americans bought in and have continued to buy in over the last 2 years. And there is now an active US Canadian fan base in the US and Canada. Now, if they were to take games to the US, can you imagine the ratings? Because it is a far simpler version of rugby to follow than Union. Far faster pace, less stoppages in play, and it's just a simpler form of the game. And when you've got the best players in the world showcasing their skills in some of the biggest sports stadiums in the world, because the collegiate stadiums are huge, the Rose Bowl is huge, Soldier Field is huge. Michigan State, some of these stadiums that the NFL playing and collegiate football playing are massive. Can you imagine playing in front of 100,000 people? I can't imagine rugby league at the moment being played in front of 100,000 people on an international broadcast, but it could happen. It could absolutely happen. But as I say, if the NRL is serious, it cannot be a one-off gimmick. They have to go back on a regular one game per season or one round per season. So Magic Round would be the perfect round to take, I would have thought. Or a round midway through the State of Origin would be perfect. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine that? Like, honestly, if they market it correctly and the ticket price is the right price. They don't undervalue the product, but they get the ticket price reasonable. And they get the right broadcaster. Most likely ESPN would probably be the right broadcaster, or TNT over in the US would probably be the right broadcaster. Rogers, maybe TSN for Canada. The Sportsnet is Rogers, but if they get the right broadcaster with the biggest reach, that would be CBC in Canada, I'd have thought. The reach it would have and the impact it would have would be undeniably massive. And rugby league needs some positive headlines. And if we are to grow the game globally, you need the US market. You need the US dollar. You need the US audience. And at the moment, rugby league in the US and Canada has been mismanaged with the Wolfpack and the Ottawa Races. The interest is there. The interest is there. And I can absolutely do a video on should the NRL take games to the US, but it has to be the right stadium in the right time zone. It has to be the right round. It can't be one of the bye rounds. You want Magic round would be brilliant, because then you get every team playing. It cannot be a gimmick. It cannot be a one-off. It has to be a regular promise to come back every season, much like the NFL does with London. And you have to get the right networks, be it NBC, CBS, CBC, ESPN, involved with the TV rights for a national broadcast within the US and Canada, and then the overseas rights. You have to get that right. The domestic rights in Australia should probably be Foxtel and Channel 9. The UK probably be Sky or BBC, possibly Channel 4. The rest of the world, you have to get that right, because if you are going to take it there, you have to reach a wider audience. And ESPN is actually a global channel, to be fair. So it will be interesting because it has been discussed. And this Rugby League World Cup needs to be a success. And I have some reservations about crowd numbers, quality of the tournament, and delaying it by a year. There are some concerns that if this Rugby League World Cup doesn't deliver, how damaging it's going to be for the brand of the sport. But yeah, no, the NRL has a lot to gain, and Rugby League has a lot to gain if the NRL takes the lead in global development and takes the lead in doing something like this, where they do take regular season games, even if it's the Club World Challenge. Because it's got that word world in it. The US will be like, well, we haven't got a team. We need to, figure out how to make this product work, how to improve our domestic semi-professional game and make it professional. The US will want to have a crack at it. And part of the emphasis of getting Major League Rugby was when the All Blacks played Ireland at Soldier Field in Chicago on one of the summer matches, and it sold out. So there does need to be that I think the NRL has to take the lead on this. Has to take the lead on it. There can be no second chances. They have to take the lead, and it can't be a gimmick. It has to be a regular thing. And they need to get the publicity right. They need to get the broadcasters right, and they need to get the right round to take it. Now, whether that's the All-Star game, whether that's the opening night, whether that's the State of Origin game as a neutral location, whether it's Magic Round, whatever it may be, they have to get that right. Now, whether rugby league fans in Australia would be in favour of it, taking regular season games overseas, that's another thing. And that's something that needs to be taken into consideration, how fans in the US and Canada feel about Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NHL, and the NBA taking games overseas. I'm yet to see how North American fans feel about their major leagues already going overseas, how they feel about doing that, because I know it comes up in discussions with the CBA. I know it comes up in discussions in their CBAs about the overseas series. It did about Mexico with the NFL, and players weren't overly happy about going to Mexico. So absolutely, if the NRL get it right and get the contract negotiations right for broadcast deal and sponsorship and publicity and marketing, it could be a fantastic success or a fantastic failure. And there are certain locations when the NRL is played where the weather will be perfect for an evening game on the right time zone, where they can hit the US market at the right time. And a place like Chicago, the West Coast, more likely the West Coast than the East Coast. However, I think the central time zone, so somewhere like Chicago, would be perfect because it suits the European market and the Australian market. It suits both because of the time differential. It does suit both. So the West Coast would suit the domestic Australian Kiwi market better. And there's a lot of South Sea Islanders and Pacific Islanders and Maori who live in the US, predominantly on the western side of the US. And there is a sizable Australian expat community to do with the oil industry and the defence industry who live and work in the US. I would have thought Chicago would be the perfect midpoint, but a West Coast stadium like Seattle, like San Francisco, the Oakland Coliseum, if they could refurb that, one of the LA stadiums could be perfect, but it would have to be an evening game because of the heat. And Major League Soccer would have to be okay with, especially the LA locations, with their stadiums being used for rugby league, be it the Magic Weekend, Magic Round, or a regular season one-off game, be it State of Origin or a regular season game, where they would have to reconfigure the pitch for a weekend, and that would mean Major League Soccer couldn't play there. But the West Coast is possibly more doable for the Australian market, but for the international market, Chicago would be perfect. Or Salt Lake City, because there's a lot of rugby fans in Utah. That would be perfect. But it's all about getting the infrastructure right, choosing the stadium location, choosing the broadcast partners, the marketing, the promotion, the publicity, the advertising, and also the players would have to be on board. The Australian, like the NRLPA, the CBA negotiations, they would have to be on board to be willing to go out of state to a foreign country to play a competitive regular season match. You would have to get the players on board. You would have to get the clubs on board. You would have to get the domestic Fox and Channel 9 and Sky in New Zealand on board. You would have to get a lot of things right, and a lot of discussions would have to be made in order to take it over there. They have played State of Origin in the US before. They have played a State of Origin game in LA. So it has been done, but it was a one-off and it was never repeated, which was a massive mistake. Although Tina Turner was used for publicising. I think it was the 95. She did it twice. She did it in 1990, I think 1995. Simply the Best. They did a massive promotional thing and they got Tina Turner because she was doing something in Australia at the time. I think it was to do with Mad Max the first time around. Yeah, absolutely. The players would have to be on board, much like with the NFL with their CBA negotiations about taking games to Mexico. The players weren't really enamoured with going to Mexico City for security reasons. There were some security concerns because of the cartels and kidnapping gangs in Mexico. There were some concerns that the players raised about their security in Mexico. And that's one of the things holding back a London team would be the team owners and it. How much pressure would like the MLS and Major League Baseball put upon the broadcasters saying, hang on a second, this is our regular season slot. We're competing against the NRL now for this TV revenue and TV audience and fan audience, how the established major leagues over in the US that play at the same time of year, which is the MLS and Major League Baseball. Plus, you've got the Stanley Cup playoffs that are around the corner. You have the NBA playoffs around, starting. The major leagues, all the major leagues apart from the NFL, would probably go, are we so sure about being happy with another major league from another country having games on our soil? But La Liga tried it, proposed it. Barcelona and I think Girona, two La Liga clubs, wanted to take regular season games to, I think it was New York, I believe. Now, in the end, the players in the Spanish FA blocked that, and the players threatened to go on strike. So you would have to get the players on board, and you would ultimately have to get the fans on board, because that's lost revenue domestically, and you've got season ticket holders and club members who pay for their yearly membership or their yearly season ticket that would miss out on a game. Bearing in mind, in the NRL, they are taking games to Darwin next round. They are taking games to the country New South Wales and Queensland. So like the regional areas of New South Wales, Queensland, like Dubbo and Rockhampton and Central Coast, and they are taking games outside of Brisbane and Sydney on the road. They go to Perth, they go to Darwin, they take to Adelaide and Perth and non-NRL cities. And they already have those agreements in place on a yearly rotational basis, where certain clubs will have an agreement where they take certain home games on the road. So like South Sydney and Canterbury Bulldogs, for example, do take games out of Sydney, home games. Canberra have taken games to like Dubbo, I think, and Wagga Wagga this season. So the NRL clubs have agreement with certain regional centres in New South Wales and Queensland to take regular season home games already on the road. So there would have to be a lot of discussions around the clubs and the players about such a move on a yearly basis, and while the NRL has already come from taking games around Australia, and they are doing it this season on a big scale, to take it overseas, the players will definitely want concessions, revenue sharing, merchandise sharing, and we'll have to see. I don't think it happens in the next couple of years. I think they're going to wait until there's 18 teams in the league, so you could take every team on Magic Round, for example, could work. But then you've got Magic Round in Brisbane, and how would Suncorp Stadium respond to that? Because that's a big revenue earner for Suncorp, the stadium operators, for sponsorship. I forget, because it's obviously the Lang Park, but Brisbane leased the stadium at Suncorp. Well, it's Lang Park traditionally. The only NRL club that owns its own stadium is Cronulla. Every other NRL club leases their stadium from local council or private entity. So the only club that doesn't have to pay to play at their own stadium is Cronulla. So there is that to consider, the lost revenue stadium operators, be it local authority owned or privately owned, when you take games away from those locations. The clubs already have agreements when they take home games on the road, home and away teams, when they agree we're going to be playing a game in Darwin, or we're going to be playing a game in Dubbo or in Rockhampton or Coffs Harbour or wherever it may be, in New South Wales or Queensland. Yes, the North American Rugby League, it has gone surprisingly quiet. I think COVID's had an impact on that. I think the constant COVID restrictions have definitely had an impact. I'll have to look into that. But in order to get a professional league off the ground, you have to grow the fan base domestically in the US. And one of the ways to do that is to take the best league in the world to the US every season. And I think Magic Round, possibly long term, could be the way to do that, because you get to see all the teams and all the players play in a 2-3 day period. And especially with the US obviously having the Football World Cup coming up in 4 years as a co-host, it wants to prove, alongside Canada and Mexico, that it can host a non-traditional sport and have good crowd numbers. And in order for the game to grow internationally, the NRL has to take the lead, because the Super League has failed catastrophically with the Toronto Wolfpack and the Ottawa Races. The RFL and the Super League have really damaged their reputation globally. Yeah, there was a lot of players getting signed in 2020 and 2021, and it has gone very quiet. There's a lot of players. Some of them have played in the Super League and NRL. It has gone very, very quiet. I've not seen anything in the Australian media or the British media about it. I've seen nothing on social media now for a little while. That's ultimately got to be a concern, considering that they were signing up some pretty solid rugby league talent. Not outstanding, but solid. So we'll have to have a look into that and see what's actually happening there, because I can get tickets for the Blackburn away at Bournemouth for £10. Ironically, I can afford that, and I'm a Blackburn club member, so that will be interesting if I can actually get tickets away to Bournemouth. I might try and snap up some tickets, because I've got some time off this week. Might give it a go, but let's have a look at the NARL. Let's see what's happening. Here we go. It's still upcoming. They've only got 6 teams, though. That's a problem. They've only got it is inaugural. It is upcoming. Let's have a look what they're saying online. The North American Rugby League is an upcoming club competition in North America. At launch, the league announced 14 teams, 12 from the US and 2 from Canada. Its inaugural season was planned for last year, but deferred to this year because of COVID. The league will now launch with 6 foundation teams, 5 from the US, and the Wolfpack are coming back, and the season will kick off on the 21st of May. So in a month's time, it will be kicking off. So there's only 6 teams, though. That is a problem. An American-based rugby league competition was first established in '98, with the American NRL was formed. The competition lasted for 13 years, until 13 clubs left to form the US ARL, citing poor running of the competition as their reason for a breakaway. The US Rugby League was founded in 2011. However, the American NRL was still active, and there were 2 major rugby league competitions in the US. In 2013, the AMNRL did not run a competition, and it folded. So US ARL is now the sole governing body. The Wolfpack were founded and entered the British RFL system and were promoted to the Super League in 2019. Following the success of the Wolfpack, 2 other clubs, Ottawa Races and New York, were formed and accepted in the RFL. However, Toronto withdrew from the Super League after 7 rounds following financial problems due to COVID, and were not readmitted at the end of the 2020 season. Before the RFL accepting Ottawa and New York, the demise of Toronto, and a report by then Super League Chief Executive Robert Elstone, who's now gone, by the way, so there was no opportunity for rugby league in North America left outside, with transatlantic teams competing in the British system. After the demise of the Wolfpack, a club which had previously seen as a success caused shockwaves to be sent across America. A former trialist for the Wolfpack set up the Cleveland Rugby League in 2020. In March 2021, the North American Rugby League was announced and slated to include 14 founding teams. The 2 clubs previously accepted, which were Ottawa and New York, as well as Toronto and Cleveland, the Atlanta Rhinos, Boston 13s, and Brooklyn Kings, a former rugby union club, and 6 uniform clubs in Austin, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Portland, and San Diego, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. In April 2021, the US ARL issued a statement that the North American Rugby League is not recognised or sanctioned by them, and therefore anyone playing was ineligible to play at international level. The inaugural season was due to start last year on June 19th. There were plans to draft players. On May 12th, the league announced the Western Conference would be postponed until it was unable to arrange adequate insurance for players. On the 7th of June last year, Robert Curtis, the league's chief operating officer, announced that the competition would be suspended until 2022 due to cost issues and health and safety restrictions because of COVID. Following the announcement of the league suspension, the US Rugby League said any players were barred from the 2021 season. Macron is the main sponsor for kits, and obviously in October the Ottawa Races relocated to Cornwall, obviously last year and became Cornwall Rugby League Football Club. Right, let's have a look at the teams. Right, here's the teams. The league will initially have 6 teams and plans to expand to 24 within 4 to 5 seasons, which I think is ridiculous, by the way. The 5 confirmed teams are Atlanta, the Atlanta Rhinos, the Cleveland Rugby League Football Club, the New York Rugby League Football Club, the Toronto Wolfpack, who are reforming, and the Washington DC Cavalry. A 6th team will be announced in 2022. The league initially announced 14. The exception of the Old Aces opted out. There is that. So it's due to start in May. It's due to start in a month's time. So that'll be interesting if it actually does start on time. They've got to pick up a 6th team yet, so we'll see what happens with that 6th team, because Ottawa have decided to relocate back to Cornwall, which I think shows that the RFL have completely failed, and they're saying, "Oh, there's no hope for it." Which this is where I think the NRL has to be the driving force, and has to. And what is noticeable is all the teams are on the East Coast. That's interesting. The East and the Southeast, none on the West Coast. So that is interesting. But that's where the traditional game is played in North America, is the East Coast. Their semi-pro league is all on the East Coast. It is, but that's due to Ottawa relocating, obviously, back to the UK, to Cornwall, last year. And I think the RFL has a big part to play in the failure of getting it off the ground, and the mess they made of Toronto and the mess they made of Ottawa. The RFL and the Super League cannot be the driving force behind expanding the game in North America. It has to be the NRL. Has to be. There is no other way to sum it up, apart from the RFL have failed, have lost a lot of money. They've relied on government loans for the last 2 years to survive. Grassroots clubs are struggling. My favourite rugby kit right now is it in Legal Union. I love Parramatta's kit in the NRL. Massive fan of their kit. I really like it. Obviously, as a Raiders fan, I love the fact we've got Canberra Milk back as a sponsor. It's like one of the iconic sponsors of the 80s and 90s when they were at their peak of their powers. So I like Canberra's kit. They haven't really changed too much in their history. The Roosters, their Anzac Day kit is beautiful. Absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning, their Anzac kit. I love that. Is just a brilliant alternate jersey. I know it's not their traditional blue, but my God, it's a beautiful kit. Absolutely stunning kit. It's the right colour blue as well. It's that soft ocean, tropical sea blue, that turquoisey blue, that sandy. That is a stunning kit. Absolutely stunning. I'm having a think because you put me on the spot, but I have to admit that Roosters Anzac Day kit from today. I mean, I haven't seen the game yet, so bear with me, but that is an absolutely fantastic kit. Last year it was brilliant as well. They have people like, oh, it's the wrong colour blue. It's not traditional dark. No, it is a stunning kit. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic kit. I'm trying to think now. I like the colours of the Titans kit, but I'm not sure on their actual design, how they do all the striping and all the colouring, but I do like the Titans kit. I love the Warriors retro kit they're currently wearing, which is a hark back to their 95 kit. That's a stunning kit as well. I love their retro kit they've gone back to with their original colours. Fantastic. Really good move. I love Cronulla's design, but I think that blue could be a little bit darker. Any international kits? Obviously, the iconic one is Australia, and the other iconic one is New Zealand. I love Papua New Guinea's kit. I love the PNG kit. That's a beautiful. It's their national colours as well. That's a beautiful kit. I like some of the older French ones as well. The French kits, like nice. I like the Italian kit as well. There are some really. I'm looking forward to seeing what Jamaica play in and what Greece play in the autumn. I'm really looking forward to the kits they run out in. But no, the iconic golden V and the iconic white V, the white and black V of Australia and New Zealand, before all the sponsorship like Pertec, before all that, they're iconic kits of the years past. I know the GB Lions have obviously got a fantastic kit design as well from the old school days. I'm not a big fan of the Gillette sponsorship on it. I'm not a big fan of big sponsors on the international kits, but I understand why they're there. I do. When it comes to World Cup, they're not there, which is fantastic. I'm not a fan of the England kit with the weird cross. Not a fan of that. The offset cross. No, you wouldn't get the audience. Women's rugby league and women's rugby union, yes, you'll get the audience because they are absolutely brutal. Let me just clear up that. I've got a group that I'm a moderator and an admin on Facebook. I've got to do some admin work on that because we're having lots of new members join. I've got to approve them or not approve them and welcome them to the group. And I love being an admin, by the way, and a moderator. It's fantastic. I don't think we see rounders, but netball has been a success, both domestically here and in Australia and New Zealand. Massive success, and Jamaica as well. Jamaica's got a very good netball team and a very good system. So in certain countries, yes, certain women's only sports, predominantly women's sports, are doing really well. I don't think rounders or softball really has that reach. But I do think women's rugby league and women's rugby union are showing bumper figures. Women's football is showing bumper figures, which is good. Women's ice hockey is definitely starting to grow in certain markets and is well supported, and cricket as well. Cricket is actually growing massively, especially in the subcontinent of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. That it's just exploded, and they've got some brilliant players, and there's a reason why they're so good at it. It's one of their national sports, and of course, you've got 1 billion people who play it or are interested in it. So you can see why they've got the player base and the talent base. I don't know if they still have it, but the Fiji New Zealand kit from 2019 are stunned. Yes, they are absolutely fantastic kits. The Fijian one isn't as iconic for me, but some brilliant players have put on that jersey. But I like PNG's kit. That is a fantastic, absolutely fantastic international kit. It is a beauty. It's a thing of beauty, and it's actually a very collectible item. The PNG kit is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I also like some of the indigenous round jerseys. They are absolutely beautiful, and they're again very sought after. They go for a lot of money. If you can't buy them first time rounds, they go for a lot of cash as collectibles. Well, there you go. I mean, your daughter's friend has gone from one sport to another and is succeeding at that other sport and playing at a high level. You can go wrong with black and white. It all depends how you do your striping or your checkerboard. There are ways you can do a black and white kit, and there are ways not to do it. And some teams have been criticised for getting it a bit wrong. And this is where American fans go, why are they wearing referees' kits? When it comes to football and sometimes rugby league and sometimes rugby union, is the black and white vertical stripes. They can't get their head round like Newcastle United and Notts County and Juventus and Udinese and a few of the other clubs that play in black and white stripes. They just go, why are they wearing the referees kit? Because obviously in North American sports, like the NHL, Major League Baseball, in fact, all the major league sports, traditionally the referees play in black and ref in the vertical stripes. They can't quite get their head around that. They get very, very confused. So you have to get that right for the sports market you're playing in. So you can get it wrong. But no, the Kiwi rugby league kits of the 80s and 90s are absolutely outstanding. And the World Cup kit, they are just beautiful. I'm not even going to try and deny it. I want to get my hands on a PNG kit. I want to get my hands on an Italy Rugby League international kit and a Greece and Jamaica one. I want to get hold of some of the rarer ones. Like Lebanon's international kit's beautiful as well. But I do want to get my hands on some of the smaller niche nations, the rarer ones that otherwise outside of your England and Australia and New Zealand. The Cook Islands one is quite nice as well. That's a really nice kit. And again, that's another rare one because the population size of the Cook Islands is tiny. Domestic population, they're overseas diaspora. Okay, there's more Cook Islanders living overseas than in the Cook Islands with their kids and grandkids. Yes, they are. I do like the 2019 Rugby Union World Cup kits are beautiful, but the Rugby League ones, I'm sorry, I find them a bit more attractive. Especially with some of the retro designs that are coming back in this season. Like Brisbane have got the collar back. The Brisbane Broncos have got the old 90s collar back, which they used to have. And the Roosters have won a couple of retro kits this season. When they were playing the Warriors at the SCG the other week, they had the retro 2002 design kit. That was fantastic seeing that again with the retro numbering as well, and the retro colours of the V, the all white kit with the retro V and the retro numbering and the retro V style. That was fantastic. Their Anzac round kit the last couple of years, including this year, is fantastic. The Warriors going back to their retro kit from 2002 as well. The jersey, and then some of the Anzac Day jerseys are brilliant. This Parramatta's is a fantastic, stunning. The Parramatta jersey for this year's Anzac Day, Anzac round. So this round, a couple of games today, that is a thing of beauty. They've really blown it out of the park with that one. And that last year, their Indigenous round kit was a stunner as well. Some clubs just get their alternate kits. They're kits that they only wear for 1 or 2 rounds. They're retro kits and their special round kits like Women League round, Indigenous, and an Anzac round. Oh, Parramatta always blow it out of the water. North Queensland blow it out of the water as well with their kits are fantastic. I think Penrith should be playing in their golden brown jerseys. I don't like their pink alternate, and I don't like their black one. I think Penrith should be playing in their brown and white stripe with their brown kit. That is a fantastic kit. Brown, people go brown. Yeah, they should be playing in their oak brown colour kit. That is a fantastic kit. Their training jerseys are fantastic as well. The Melbourne Storm, I think they could do a bit more with their kit. I don't find that. I find that very generic and dull. But no, I like what the New Zealand Warriors are doing with their retro, their return to their original colours for the last couple of seasons. That is just a beautiful, beautiful kit. I want to get my hands on one. You can see where I'm going with this. I'm going to be going on the thing is the Redcliffe Dolphins kit looks like Morecambe or an Arsenal kit. It just doesn't look like a rugby league kit. It looks like a cheap Arsenal knockoff or a cheap Morecambe knockoff. It just doesn't look right. With all the money they've got and the time they've got, like we've won this bid, we've got a year and a half prepared. That initial kit looks really, really disgusting. It just doesn't suit rugby league. But yes, some of Argentina's kits in both football and rugby union are fantastic as well. Absolutely, I love the Argentina kits. They're just Uruguay. They've got some good kits historically in rugby union and football. Yes, they are in this year's Rugby League World Cup. They've qualified. They missed out on the last one, but they're back in this one. They last qualified in 2013. Their kit looks. I love. The Cook Islands always turn out in a really good kit with those rich dark green colours. That's just a fantastic. It's a rare one as well. Very desirable if you're a jersey collector. So I can see where I'm going with this. I'm going to go on the NRL shop when I get my tax rebate. I'm due a fair tax rebate. I'm going to be going on the old NRL shop, I think, ordering a shed load of jerseys. But yes, the Cook Islands are in this year's World Cup, and they've got some good players who are going to be eligible to play for them as well. Nicol Klugstad and Dylan Napa are some of their high-profile players. But yeah, there are some good kits out there. talking about like retro designs, the 90s retros are designs where clubs are sort of going back to their old colour schemes and old designs are actually really popular right now. With a lot of teams and a lot of sports, they've realised that when we were kids watching and buying in, and when the sport, I think the 90s was when professional sport was at its peak, they've realised that we're now older, we're parents, we've obviously developed into hardcore fans, and they want to tap into it. Yeah, some of the World Cup kits since over the years are fantastic, especially I would say 2007 onwards. They are brilliant. But I do like the Italy kit from '87 and the France kit from '87. They are iconic. They are iconic, those two kits. They really are. They really, they're desirable if you can get a retro Cotton Traders or a manufacturer who makes the retro designs and has the rights to them. They are beautiful, beautiful kits, and they're very desirable. If you have a parent or a grandparent or an older sibling that has one, don't let them sell it. Keep it in the family. They are very collectible. But no, obviously the NHL did its reverse retro design last year, and mostly positive over negative reviews. And some of the kit jerseys they released were so successful that Ottawa and Arizona rebranded themselves with their retro logos and retro designs for this season. So we may see more teams do like retro. They do retro-esque designs where they rebrand themselves and go back to what they were wearing in the 90s and the early 2000s. I think that Roosters kit from 2002 is one of the most iconic kits in the history of rugby league. The Warriors 95 kit, which they've gone back to the similar design, not quite true to their original. There's a few little differences, but similar design is fantastic. And the Broncos with their collar, they've got this here, their retro collar design is beautiful as well. I thought the World Cup kits from the big nations would be easy to get a hold of, thinking it would be like the likes of Samoa and Tonga. No. Honestly, the Namibia kit is fantastic. And now some of the smaller nations are actually easier to get hold of than the bigger ones. The bigger ones sell out quite quickly because obviously bigger fan bases and they really go and they're worth more. But ironically, the smaller nations are actually the ones that end up being worth more later on, down the line, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. The Portugal kit from 2007, I would love to get my hands on one of them. And Ivory Coast from 95. Yes, Ivory Coast played the World Cup in 1995. Love to get my hands on one of their kits, but they're damn near impossible to find. But yeah, no, if you look in the right places and if certain manufacturers have the license to reproduce the retro designs, then absolutely. I mean, Zimbabwe's kit is fantastic. Rugby union-wise, that's a beautiful kit. And different because it's hooped. It's green and white hoops. Dark green and white hoops. It's a completely unique international kit. Only Japan and Argentina are similar in their jersey design with stripes or hoops. But the Zimbabwe one is fantastic. Namibia's one is fantastic. The Brazil kit is actually really nice as well, and the Chile kit is good. They did. The Kenya kit is actually nice. Some of the tier 2 and tier 3 nations actually have better kits than the tier 1 nations. I think they have better kit designs. They're more easy on the eye. They're more attractive, I think. And Namibia always come out with a good kit. Kenya always have a good kit. Hong Kong's kit's quite nice as well, actually. That dark royal blue. Oh, that dark navy royal blue. Oh, the Hong Kong kit is really nice. The Germany kit's quite nice as well, and the Belgian kit. Some of the tier 2 and tier 3 nations have actually they look nicer. Spain won't be at the World Cup next year. They fielded an eligible player. Well, there you go. They've done it two World Cup qualifiers in a row where they ballsed up with being stupid. And the game in Spain is solidly played in the north and in the Catalan country, and they ballsed up 2 World Cup qualifying campaigns in a row when they were dead certain to qualify, and they ballsed it up. So I've got no sympathy for their union. I've got no sympathy for their coaching setup for selecting a player who was suspended and not allowed to play. So I've got no sympathy for them for screwing up, because that's 2 World Cup qualifying campaigns in a row that they have ballsed up. And yeah, I think it'd be Romania, because they've also missed out because of what happened in the last qualifying campaign for the last World Cup. But again, that is just, on Spain's part, that is just amateur hour. And they've been at World Cups before, and you look at their sports history, as in, professional and semi-pro sports. They've got some really good sports administrators and some good sports structures in place. That it actually amazes me that 2 World Cup qualifying campaigns in a row, they ballsed it up. When a lot of their top players play in France, and when it comes to Spanish sport administration, they actually are pretty good. So I'm really surprised by how amateur they have been in the last 2 qualifying campaigns, and it's cost them. And I hope so. That's how it should be. But unfortunately, now we're seeing less and less of the traditional style, and I think rugby union's starting to lose a little bit of its tradition when it comes to the kits, a little bit. But I would love to see Romania play in their traditional yellow, blue, and red. That is fantastic. That is an iconic kit of many a World Cup past, and it was a shame they weren't there in 2019, because that is a fantastic kit. They've got a fantastic rugby union structure domestically in Romania. The budget they operate on, the structures there are solid, and that kit is iconic and more desirable than the football kit historically as well. It's more collectible. It's just so easy. It's so easy on the eye, because it's their national colours as well. It is the national tricolor, the national flag. It's really one of those kits that is very collectible, and I want to get my hands on one. In fact, I want to get my hands on. I mean, I don't have the room. I mean, Christ, if I had the money, I would. My flat would be a sports museum. There'd be kits all over the place. I'd put hangers on the walls. That'd be all over the place. But I just don't have the space. If I had a bigger flat, then absolutely, this would turn into just a sports man cave. It absolutely would. Then I would have to clean it every day, and there's too many spiders in here. The big one up there. The big one up there. There's too many spiders in here. They piss me off. But yeah, don't tempt me. Don't tempt me, because I will start ordering stuff online that I can't afford, can't justify. Dangerous. Living by oneself and having the access to online shopping, it is a dangerous game I am playing. I hope Chile get that. Yes, it will be at the US's expense. And then the questions start getting asked about the quality of Major League Rugby. And I think Major League Rugby has been successful in growing the game massively. And if the US get beaten by Chile, it shows that on the national setup, at least, the structures within the national side are stagnating. Canada's gone backwards. Canada in the last 5-6 seasons has gone backwards. And it won't be a good look for Major League Rugby with the growth of the game domestically if both Canada and the US fail to qualify. It's the first time Canada's failed to qualify. The US cannot fail. Chile, they'll be motivated because it's an opportunity for them to reach the top table for the first time. Uruguay have taken massive leaps and bounds. They've benefited from Major League Rugby. They've benefited from their top players playing a decent level in the US and getting paid. And even their top players are playing in France and playing at a decent level in the top division and the second division and getting paid. So they've really benefited from the rise of professionalism in the US and Canada with the Major League Rugby, whereas the Canadian and US teams, they are going backwards. And I'm really surprised with that, considering that the game has gone professional. You've got proper professional training methods now where you are getting paid to play rather than being part-time. The Canadian union's in a mess. Their decline has been depressing. They've got the individual talent to do it. They've got the athletes to do it. Partly because of the expat communities, Greeks and Lebanese in Australia. And it is the national sport in Lebanon now. It is actually now the national sport in Lebanon. In Greece and Lebanon, big expat communities in Sydney and Melbourne, in Australia. There's actually a couple of Greeks who've actually got to be representing Greece, and some of the Lebanese actually were born in Lebanon and moved as children to Australia. So actually, some of them are actually domestically born, and I think there's 2 Greek players that are Greek. So it's going to be interesting. I want to see them do well. I do, and I want Lebanon. There's a lot of top quality Lebanese players who are either first or second generation immigrants. There's a massive Lebanese community in Sydney, in the southern beaches. There's a massive Lebanese community in the western suburbs, and the Greek community in both Sydney and Melbourne is huge. Peter V'landys, the guy who runs the Australian Rugby League Commission, is Greek. He anglicised his name to V'landys. I forget what it was. It was Varanakos or something, and his father anglicised the name so he wouldn't get bullied at school. But Peter V'landys is Greek. His dad was his parents were Greek immigrants after the war. So the guy running the game in Australia is a first generation son of a Greek immigrant, and his parents are Greek born. So yes, you could argue they are Australian nationals, but they do qualify with the grandparent rule. So you have to have at least a living grandparent or a deceased grandparent who was born or had the nationality of those countries, and a lot of them are second generation, which means their grandparents either died in Greece or still live in Greece. And if they're first or second generation immigrants, then it doesn't matter. If they're fourth generation, then they're Aussies. You have to have it's the grandparent rule. That's why Blake Austin can play for Portugal, because one of his grandparents is Portuguese, and he can also play for Great Britain because one of his parents is English, and Australia. It's mad that. Luke Jackson, who's currently playing for the West Tigers, has played for Great Britain as well, because again, Terry Evans could play for Wales and England. Then again, the likes of Georgia and Romania getting in, it's cultural. It's cultural because you don't have that Romanian and Georgian community in Australia. And it's only recently that the Romanians have been coming over here, and most of them have actually settled in the southern half of England, which is Union, and the northern half is League. So there's not a massive Romanian community in the north, but there is in London and the southeast. So there you go. If a lot of Romanian immigrants went to the north of England when they joined the EU, their kids would be playing League. And there you would see suddenly when they do come home, it has an impact. But Ceausescu, the former dictator, was a big Union fan. And put a lot of state money into the rugby union system over League. So there's a reason why. And Georgia, again, the Soviet Union put a lot of emphasis in their union programs over League for whatever reason. And that's a byproduct of communism, ironically, is union. The upper class version is popular, whereas the working class version League is not, because whatever reason. It was down to government administrators being fans of Union over League and investing in said. No, I think there generally was state, because the Russian domestic game is actually pretty decent, and again, it was generally down to the fact that a lot of the British diplomats during the war, and of course in World War I as well, a lot of the diplomatic corps and the officers who went over to help the Tsarist army and the White Russians fight the Bolsheviks took it with them. And then in World War II, again, military missions, again, same thing applies. So there are cultural reasons and historical reasons why. Yes, Serbia's got Red Star Belgrade play League, and they played in the Challenge Cup. But again, Union, you've got a bigger global imprint with what was the IRB, which is now World Rugby, whereas International Rugby League is bankrupt. It has no money. Whereas Rugby Union has the big international TV deals for the World Cup and the Six Nations and the Rugby Championship, and now they have more money, they have more sponsorship, and they have more registered players playing globally over League. So there you go. Well, for whatever reason, the professional game is secondary to what was the amateur game. It's a head scratcher to me as well, but there you go. Anyway, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you very much for all your questions. Really appreciate it. Some really good, interesting topics we discussed. I mean, we started off with obviously Oldham Athletic getting relegated, Everton in the bottom three. Concerns about the long-term future of those clubs. Burnley do honestly have an easier fixture list, and I think they can possibly get out of it now. If only Burnley had won those games in hand after with their COVID problems, Sean Dyche would still have a job, and they would not be in the bottom three because they're too good a side to go down. Who they get as a permanent replacement for Sean Dyche, that's anyone's guess. Pochettino could be free in the summer. But so, yeah, whoever Burnley get as a permanent replacement for Sean Dyche, we'll see. Everton are in serious trouble. PSG could be moving on from Poch. And then Conte's heavily linked with a move to PSG. So Tottenham, again, could possibly lose a manager who hasn't been in the role very long. And that is a very strong rumour circulating on mainstream media, is that Pochettino's on the way out and Conte going to PSG. Conte's just taken over at Spurs. I wouldn't be surprised if Levy goes, compensation payment, yep, we're getting paid. PSG can afford the compensation payment money. So, and Conte's been very critical of how Tottenham was run. And we shall see. Plus, there's that vacancy at Ajax at the moment from next season. Burnley are looking for a manager. If they do stay in the Premier League, they're a Premier League club looking for a manager. Rooney's position at Derby isn't certain because of the uncertainty around that club, and Tuchel's position is not certain at Chelsea with the uncertainty around that club and future owners and such. So there's going to be some managerial movement in the summer, let alone player movement. And I think Man United are going to be very active. Newcastle are going to be very active. Everton could be in a fire sale mode in the summer if they go down. Burnley could be in a fire sale mode in the summer if they go down. In the Championship, I think Peterborough are fucked. And of course, Oldham have fallen out of the Football League. So there's a lot going on. There's going to be a lot of player movement, a lot of manager movement. There's some clubs in serious difficulty off the field. We could see a lot of stuff. But anyway, thank you very much for all your questions. Really appreciate it. And I will have some more videos and more content for you very, very soon.